Good evening. Today is June 23rd, and it is 6:30 p.m. We have a full dais, and we have Councilmember Jackson joining us virtually, so all of council is here, and it is 6 o'clock. I'm calling this meeting to order. The City Council reserves the right to adjourn into executive session at any time during the course of this meeting to discuss any of the matters listed below as authorized by Texas Government Code Section 551.071, 072, 073, 074, 076, and 551.086. The City Council reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session, executive session, or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. All matters listed below shall be eligible for both discussion and action unless otherwise specifically noted. We are on item number 2. If everyone will please rise, we will be saying the pledge to both the flags. If you would please remain standing, Councilmember Jackson has agreed to do the invocation this evening. Councilmember Jackson?
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for allowing us to have this regular Bastrop City Council meeting, whether in person or remotely. We want to ask that you will give us the guidance and the strength and the knowledge to go through the agenda this evening and provide the much needed support and help to our public, and that you will give us the wisdom to make sure that the decisions we make are wise. Thank you again for allowing us all to be here. I hope that you will pray for our city and our country as we are in a very difficult part of our history right now with the coronavirus and other things that are happening throughout our nation. We pray for your guidance and your success and your help in making us to be able to cope with all of this. And in your name we pray. Amen.
You may be seated. Thank you very much, Councilmember Jackson. Okay, Council, and I apologize to the 2 visitors that we have in the audience, but before we go on to the mayor's report and the council members' report, I would like to go into executive session, and we will be going in for only one item, and that is executive session item 10A. It reads as follows: City Council shall convene into closed executive session regarding a personnel matter, including but not limited to an update on the status of the appointment of a long-term city manager, assessment of the city manager position under the Bastrop Home Rule Charter and Bastrop Code of Ordinances, evaluation of employment alternatives, update on recruitment from executive search firm Chris Hartung Consulting LLC, and briefing on legal issues by the city attorney in accordance with Texas Government Code Sections 551.071 and 551.074. It is 6:33 and we are in executive session. For the public, our safety officer, if you would please put your mask back on, the safety officer is going to walk you, and because we have a council member that's participating virtually, we have to stay in this room. So you are going to get an opportunity to go to our executive conference room. So you'll be able to be 6 feet apart, be safe, and we won't lock you in. You can go to the restroom or anything you need to do, and our secretary will come get you when we are done with executive session. We good, Colin? Okay, it is 6:53 and we are out of executive session, and I believe we have a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to authorize the mayor to execute a contract with the chosen city manager candidate, Mr. Paul Hoffman, and to have his employment start with the city no later than August 3rd of 2020.
I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson and a second from Councilmember Peterson. I think several of us would like to make some comments. Councilmember Peterson, do you have anything to say?
Well, just briefly, Mayor, I think Mr. Hoffman will bring us a wealth of knowledge of how city manager, city functions. So I think he will be a very, very good asset to the city and as a city manager.
Thank you. Councilmember Rogers?
I agree with Councilmember Peterson, and also would like to add that I am looking forward to him. I think he's going to be a great fit for the city and the council and moving forward.
Excellent. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yeah, now that we're in the implementation phase of a lot of our capital improvement projects, I think his wealth of experience and his background is going to lend itself readily to the needs of the city. So I'm really excited about his arrival.
Councilmember Ennis?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a gentleman that has extensive experience, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, at different cities around the state. He is going to bring a wealth of knowledge to our city, and we have spent a lot of time and a lot of interviewing time and a lot of perusing resumes. I forget exactly how many we had.
Almost 40.
How many?
We had almost 40 applicants, and Mr. Hartung brought forward, I think, a little over, somewhere over 20 applications that we all spent time reviewing.
So this has been an exhaustive search from all over the country, and we're very proud of the person we've chosen.
Councilmember Jackson?
I'd just like to say that I think that our new city manager brings a wealth of knowledge and experience with him, and I welcome him to the team.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. We all agreed that it is singularly the most important decision that a city council can make, and that is picking the city manager that's going to lead our wonderful staff, work with us, implement the policy that this council votes on, and make sure that that policy gets put in place. Several of you have mentioned what a great fit you think he will be for the community. He is a breath of fresh air. I believe Mayor Pro Tem Nelson mentioned the comment of a refreshing start for everyone as we move in these critical areas. Mr. Hoffman is not with us tonight, and the reason he is not with us is, in my opinion, one of the reasons I think he is going to be such a great fit for us. Some of you know last Sunday was Father's Day, and Mr. Hoffman and his wife have 3 sons. 2 of the sons are married, and they have had a family reunion planned for a very long time. So he is with his family tonight. I learned over the weekend, some of you will get a giggle out of this, some of you this may be new information. Several of you know that our county judge, Paul Poppy, his wife's name is Barb. Our new city manager, Paul Hoffman, his wife's name is Barb. So we have another Paul and Barb in the community, and specifically the reason Mr. Hoffman couldn't be with us tonight, it is their oldest son Daniel's birthday, and so I promised I would tell Daniel happy birthday from the city of Bastrop. So we're looking forward to him being on the team, and I would be remiss if I didn't take a quick moment to thank Chris Hartung for giving us such a hard job. Although Mr. Hoffman unanimously rose to the top of the chart and the cream of the crop, he had a lot of really tough competition, and we found ourselves with just excellent candidates to review, and I appreciate each and every person who applied and everyone who was involved in the selection process. So with that, Madam Secretary, if you would call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Welcome to the team, Mr. Hoffman. And for city staff who just found out, for board and commission members who just found out, the city attorney is going to be pushing a press release. You want to do a motion on that, or are we going to just do that? we're doing that. So, city staff, if you'll check your email, you'll be able to find out some more about your new boss. So that's how that goes. With that, we're going all the way back to page 1, and we are on the mayor's report, and I have just a few things, just a couple things really quickly. Not only was last Sunday Father's Day, but it was also Mayor Pro Tem Nelson's birthday. So let's have a round of applause for Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. I also found out this week, we got a little bit of sad news, kind of a mixed bag of news. Pat Crawford, that many of you know, Pat was one of the founding members of our Economic Development Corporation. She is going to be moving to be closer to her daughter, so she resigned from the EDC board. So we hate to see her go. We appreciate everything that she brought to the community, but we wish her the absolute best of luck, and we know that being close to family is a really important thing. Council, I will tell you that I have found, in my opinion, an excellent person to take her place, and I will be bringing that recommendation and appointment at the next council meeting. The next item actually came to me from Dr. Wachs, our health authority, and it involves a very quick story. She said, Mayor Schrader, would you please put the mask back on the bears outside? We think when you took the mask off, everybody thought it was okay to quit wearing masks. And I had to explain to her that we didn't put them on and we didn't take them off. There is a good Samaritan in our community somewhere that made the special mask for the bears. And we are asking Good Samaritan, whoever you are, if you would please put them back on, you would make the health authority very, very happy. Meanwhile, we're going to get a quote from a local seamstress and see if we can get another batch of them made. It's important that the Monday that we came to work and the bears had masks, I got 2 phone calls that people said we were wasting PPE, and why were we wasting them on the bear? So they're not medical masks. It was just a piece of white cloth, but they're very cute, and if you were the person who did it, please put them back on. I also want to take a quick second. We have an outstanding police department. Chief Nagy has done a fabulous job. You can imagine the stressful situations that they have found themselves in over these last few weeks. 2 of their officers, Officer DeBose and Officer Amy, that's what I was going to say, Jordan. Officer Amy helped a stranded visitor that does not live in Bastrop. There was no reason for him to help. The 2 of them helped him out, and I know that he is spreading goodwill about the city of Bastrop. They've also done just some excellent police work through some tough times, so I just want to recognize and give them a shout out of how much we appreciate their interaction with the community. We are all you have to do is turn on the news to see some of the things that are going on in other communities, and we thankfully in Bastrop have found a way to express our freedom of speech and our opinions without doing so to where it has turned into vandalism and being mean to each other, because we just need to be nice and have some respect. On June 13th, I accepted the CNU Charter Award that we received for building Bastrop. Council, it's important for you to know it took almost 10 seconds. They showed our picture. We said that we were one of the award winners, and then they moved on. So on your behalf, I accepted that. My last comment is for our good friend and the best fire chief in the state of Texas, in my opinion, and that's Andres Rosales. And I would like everyone to know that it is illegal to shoot off fireworks in the city of Bastrop. It is also important to note that when a fire starts, it does not know where the city limit line is. So you can jump over the city limit line and say, oh, but I was in the county, and there can be devastating results for our community. We were blessed with rain this morning. We need to be blessed with rain every day between now and July 4th. There was already a fire, Chief Rosales, yesterday on Highway 71 that jumped the median. We've all been there. It's dry. Please be careful. Just because we're not having a patriotic festival at Fisherman's Park, please do not think that means that each of you need to go shoot off fireworks. So that is my last plea. With that, we're at council members' reports. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, AKA Birthday Boy, would you like to go first?
I would. It seems like I'm harping on the same subject, but it's about the census. For those of our citizens who have thought that they have missed the deadline for the self-response, it has now been extended to October the 31st. And thankfully, the Census Bureau has provided you 3 different options to respond. One is by phone at 844-330-2020, or by mail, or online at mycensus2020.gov. Para español es micenso2020.gov. It's important that we participate in this. Our participation helps our community to thrive. So I would encourage people once again to participate in the census, and that's it, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Ennis?
That was very impressive, Mayor Pro Tem. As we've still been socially distancing, I haven't done a lot, but I did attend a meeting, recent meeting last week of the Historic Landmark Commission, where they considered renovations and/or changes to 3 downtown buildings, and those are moving along. There were some reconsiderations that needed to be done, and some approvals that were given. So that being the case, that was all I have to report.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking care of that for us. Councilmember Rogers?
Yes, ma'am. I have attended the Main Street meeting, which they have some really cool ideas going forward for the fall. So look forward to those coming out. And besides that, that's all I've got.
Oh, there you go. Councilmember Peterson?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I would just like to give some kudos to the Water Wastewater Department. There was a water main that was broken on MLK and Emile. I called up the city officials, and the people, the guys from Water Wastewater were there very quickly because it was eroding the concrete, the asphalt. The asphalt rose up about 3 inches.
Wow. And
it could have gotten pretty bad. And thanks to the chief, he was one of the first ones there, and he blocked off the street. So everything worked well, and they did a good job.
Excellent. Nothing like seeing our staff do a good job firsthand. Councilmember Jackson?
Well, I wanted to just say that I hope that everyone had a happy Juneteenth as well. Although we didn't have an official celebration in Bastrop, we all celebrated in our own special ways. And Councilmember Peterson's mom was honored she was going to be our parade marshal this year. But since we didn't have the parade, she did a video that is on Facebook and was very, very touching. And so I wanted to salute her for sharing her history of Bastrop with us as our parade marshal for Juneteenth. And if you get a chance to watch it, I think you'll enjoy some of the stories that she tells. It's very, very fascinating. And just wanted to shout out to her for that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Councilmember Jackson. All right, Council, we're moving to the top of page 2, City Manager's Report. Mr. Wood.
Good evening, council members and mayor. A few quick items to go over to give you an update on the budget. Our Chief Financial Officer, Tracy Waldron, Assistant City Manager Job, and I completed our round of meetings with the department directors this week. And so we met with each department, went through their proposed budgets, asked a lot of questions, asked them to look at some things. And so that's the kind of the first step in putting together a draft budget that will eventually end up in front of council. The next step is that applications will be coming in between now and the end of June for any of the community support funding, any of the groups that are seeking that funding. And then those groups will speak to council and make their request at the July 14th council meeting. In a few minutes, you will hear from CFO Waldron. She will talk about the current financial status, the city's current financial status with respect to COVID and how that's impacted the city's finances. Good news and kind of the preview for you is that it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. And then also, most of you should have talked to City Secretary Ann Franklin by now to talk about the dates for the special meetings for the budget. If you haven't talked to her, please do that as soon as you can. We're trying to make sure that the dates work and that we can get everyone here. And then before I leave the budget, I just wanted to say, as everyone here knows, this is my first time to go through the budget process with Bastrop. And you should know that you've got a really good CFO in Tracy Waldron. She knows her stuff, and she asks tough questions when the departments are in there and makes sure that their numbers are good and that the money's being taken care of and being watched over well. So you can feel good knowing that she's watching over that process. For planning and development, there's a lot of training and testing going on right now. Training and preparation and testing of the software that we're getting ready to implement. That will be implemented by the end of June. If you've been by City Hall, the training happens in the back of this room, and so there are people there almost every day for most of the day doing some type of training to get ready for the rollout of that software. We also have, related to planning and development, I've told you this before, but we're getting a contractor set up to do some work in there to make it easier for the public to interact with the staff there and vice versa. Assistant City Manager Job will talk about that a little bit more when he talks about some other work to be done here at City Hall. You may have seen, if you've been looking at social media, or if you live in this area, you might have even gotten a piece of paper at your house. There are some street closures for street and drainage work happening in the North Main area, in the area of the following streets: Locust, Magnolia, Maple, and Water Streets. And that work will be going on between June 22nd, which was yesterday, through about July 24th, depending on how the weather cooperates and how the project moves along. That work will happen from about 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And there were notices delivered to the people in those areas. And the main issue is that residents were asked not to have vehicles or other objects parked on the street, because that's where that work will be happening. They're open for driving. You can drive through there, but anyone who is driving through the area is asked to watch what's going on, because there should be signs up, and there may also be people that are directing traffic in the area. In the area of the COVID pandemic, you should have at your seat, I believe. If not, we will email a copy to the council members, a new version of the reopening schedule for city buildings and city facilities. It has changed slightly because, as most of you know, and I'm sure Mayor Schroeder will cover here in a minute, there's been some changes, and the situation has not gotten better, unfortunately. And so we've pushed out one of the phases, the phase 3, I think it's labeled on your papers there, has been pushed out a little bit. That's going to allow us to do some of the work that Trey will talk about shortly, but it's also just because with the current conditions, we felt like that needed to happen and should be pushed out a little bit. Those dates and all of the different steps in there are subject to change as the conditions change. As a reminder for council, just so you know what staff is working on, as part of the budget process, we are also reviewing the financial and personnel policies, putting together new drafts for those policies in conjunction with the finance subcommittee made up of 2 of your colleagues. And so we'll be working with them to get drafts ready that will go to council later in the summer as we move on with the budget process. Update on Wilson Street. Council will remember that we've talked about this a few times. The buttons that we've talked about putting in the street are in, and in order to make sure people are aware of what's happening and also to get input from the people who live in the area where the help was requested, Assistant City Manager Job will be meeting with those neighbors tomorrow and talking to them about the project. And so that's being done. We didn't want to just throw everything out there and surprise everyone, so he's going to meet with them and talk about what the plans are. And then the last item, there's actually 2 items that we'll actually cover in more detail a little bit later in the meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about, again, the financial conditions of the city and how some of the measures that we put into place have helped with that financial situation because of COVID. And CFO Waldron will go over that and talk about how that's going to affect some of our open positions. And then the very last item is, we talked a little bit in the past about publicity and explaining the need for a new wastewater treatment plant to the public. We're going to have a mailer that's going to get put together and sent out in the near future to get some more information out and help people understand that. And we're putting together not just that one mailer, but a campaign that will include social media and videos and some other documents and other types of media just to help people understand why the plant's needed and what the steps are in building that plant to help everyone stay educated. And we do have an item later in the agenda where we'll talk about the contract for that work. I'm sorry, for the water treatment plant.
Yes,
For the water treatment
we're
plant.
not talking about wastewater
No,
tonight.
we're not. For the water treatment plant, but we will talk about, as we move along, we'll put out more and more information to educate the public about why we need the plant, what the state requirements are, how that affects people's utility bills, and all the questions that people have about that issue.
Councilmember Rogers?
When you talked about that flyer, you're talking about putting it in the electric bill? So we're using the same stamp as it's going out, or are you talking about mailing it out separately?
Right now, we are thinking about mailing it out separately because one thing that we know from talking to people and just knowing how people are, a lot of people right now get their bill emailed to them. They're on the electronic billing, and they can either go on the portal online to look up their bill, and they also get an email copy of their bill. They get a PDF file that shows what their bill is. So oftentimes people receive their bill and they'll say either I already took care of that or I've got a copy on my computer, and they might just recycle the bill as it comes in. And so if there's a flyer in there, they may not see it. They likely won't see it. And so we can actually do a relatively inexpensive price point. We can send out a separate mailer that'll be in the form of kind of a large postcard that will have information on there, and they can also direct people to our website and social media to get more information.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ennis?
All I have to say is please make it simple.
It'll be simple.
If there's too much on it, people won't read it.
Right, you're right. You're exactly right.
Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Is the one question that I had, you guys were going to walk Main Street for benches. Is that meeting set?
It's not set.
Okay, but it will be set, right? The answer is yes.
Right, the answer is yes. It will be set. The main issue is that one of the staff members that is going to be in on that project as far as going up and down Main Street has been out of the office for about a week.
Okay,
And so
that's great.
that's delayed it.
That was on my to-do list. Councilmember Ennis?
When that date is set, would you let council know?
Absolutely. Sure.
Great.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you
Thanks.
very much, Mr. Wood. Any other questions? Councilmember Jackson, do you have any questions for Mr. Wood?
No, I just like the idea of getting the other information out to the citizens because I'm sure they do throw away the bills if they've already paid them. So that was a good suggestion.
Thank you, Councilmember Ennis, for that. All righty. We are moving on to the next item, which is item 4D, which is a proclamation, and it's a Parks and Recreation proclamation. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Bastrop, Texas, and whereas parks and recreation are important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region, and whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. Whereas parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. Whereas the City of Bastrop, Texas recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore I, Connie Schrader, Mayor of the City of Bastrop, do hereby recognize the month of July 2020 as Park and Recreation Month. Our YMCA Executive Director, our partner in recreation, is with us here tonight, and I would like to present this to Miss Terry Lynn Moore. Miss Moore, we may do the COVID pass. I'll toss it to you. All right. Okay, council, with that and with Colin always having such great patience with me, I would like to move to item 9D, as we have a gentleman in the audience that probably has a long ride home. So we are moving on to 9D, which reads as follow, and it is towards the bottom half of page number 3. Consider action to approve resolution number R 2020-56 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, approving task order number 2 to Freeze and Nichols Incorporated for engineering services required through design, construction, startup, and warranty period, related to the construction and new water treatment plant in the amount of $4,845,603 as attached in Exhibit A, authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents, providing for a repealing clause, and establishing an effective date. Mr. Job, you're not even going to introduce him? You're just throwing him to the wolves right off?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have Kendall King here from Freeze and Nichols, and he's going to talk about the proposal and answer any questions you have.
Mr. King.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and the opportunity to be of service to the city of Bastrop with this important project. We were here, you might not remember me being here, but we were here back at the end of February before the COVID lockdown, presenting the results of our preliminary design report. A man named David Munn presented that report. He was the technical leader on the design phase of the water treatment plant itself. I wanted him to present that because if there were any technical questions, he would have been much better at answering that than I would. However, I will be the project manager for your project. I'm not necessarily the technical expert on water treatment, but my specialty is managing large programs with lots and lots of moving pieces. And so I will be your project manager. I wanted to kind of, looking for some place, I guess this is the place to see it. Wanted to kind of recap a little bit about what the project involves. I'm assuming you have the draft agreement in your packet, and maybe you have a cover memo that went with it. Okay. Well, that's a short version.
Mr. King, I would just like everyone in the audience to know that it's page 125 of the packet. So if they're trying to follow from home and they're looking, since we've jumped ahead, it's on page 125. Excuse me.
No,
go ahead.
You. So your project involves drilling of 3 new production wells, construction of a water treatment plant, transmission pump station to move that water from the well field location into town. There's a small wastewater lift station that will be transporting basically the backwash water from the water treatment plant into the city. And then some future work that is not included in this contract, which Mr. Munn mentioned when he was here in February, is there still will be some work that needs to be done at the Willow plant site to expand and improve that pump station. And I will talk more about that as we get into this discussion. So those are the project components, the work that we have completed to date. As Mr. Munn talked about back in February, we have conducted a study of your population demand population and projections and demands to size the water plant. We took water samples from the well, we did bench scale testing, we determined what was the best treatment technology, we did a preliminary design for that technology of that plant. We had a groundwater hydrologist model the well field and come up with the best spacing for the wells and modeled all of that. We put all that into a preliminary design report, and then that's what we presented to you back in February. So the next steps, presuming you're ready to move ahead with the next phase of the design, is we would start on the actual design elements of the project, and on this next slide is some of the things that we will be doing as we hit the ground running when you get us notice to proceed. One of the first things we will do is work with your grant consultant that you recently retained to look at funding options for your plant. It's a big project, it's a big number. We know that you're going to look at the best way to finance that, and we will support that. And there's a lot of things we can do in helping to evaluate those different options. Some of them might be Water Development Board, revolving loan program, the SRF. It could be some of the money that's come available through CDBG, the MIT, the mitigation program, the Water Development Board, flood infrastructure program. Some of those things may apply here, and we will help your planning consultant or your grant consultant work through all of those and then support with whatever technical information is needed for those applications. We have in our contract procuring a construction manager at risk as being one of the early steps. I want to talk about that some more on the next, when we get to the next slide. But that would be one of the very first things that we start to do. Our well consultant, the hydrologist, will do the final well siting. We'll start designing those wells so that we can go out and start drilling those wells as quickly as we can. We'll start acquiring easements for the pipeline and do that final design. We'll design the water treatment plant. And then the last item on this list is do the master planning for your distribution system improvements. And that's another topic that I will come back to in a minute because we have it included in this contract and I want to explain why.
You do have it included or do not have it included?
I do have it included in this contract.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to take just a minute and talk about construction delivery methods and why we've recommended and why our contract assumes that we will build this project using construction manager at risk. I don't think that's something that the city of Bastrop has done before. I'm not positive about that, but I think I understand that. I just want to talk a little bit about the differences. So your typical way of delivering a project is what we call design, bid, build. The engineer designs it, city takes bids, contractor builds it. Basically your low bid option, your low bid approach. There's a slight variation to that, which they call competitive sealed proposals, where you can make a selection of a contractor with some additional criteria besides cost. It could be qualifications or experience with the city or whatever, but it's not straight low bid. And then the one that we are talking about, we're not talking about design build, that's another way to do things, but we're not talking about that. But what we are talking about is construction manager at risk. And it is by definition an alternative project delivery method. One of the more popular terms or the more common term that people are using now is collaborative project delivery. What it means is you're bringing a contractor on board earlier in the project. So the design doesn't have to be finished early in the project. We're bringing a construction manager on board and we work together as a team, city, design engineer, and contractor to bring that project to the point where they provide the city with a guaranteed maximum price, and then it becomes a typical construction project. And construction manager manages the construction. The reason we're recommending that is because this project involves a very diverse kinds of construction. So you've got wells that have to be drilled. You have a long pipeline that has to be built. You have a water treatment plant that has to be built. You've got site work that has to be done. No general contractor is going to do all of, I keep pushing the wrong button, is going to do all of that. And so they will be going out to get subcontractors to do that work. And with construction manager at risk, you have a lot more control, a lot more transparency into the subcontractors that the CMAR, the construction manager at risk, is going to use to build your project. So if you've got a construction manager and we go out and we take bids for whoever's going to drill the wells, you'll have some say in who's going to drill your wells. Where on a conventional design bid build project, you're going to get the guy to drill the wells that was the cheapest price, that gave a price to your construction contractor. So there's advantages to the city of using the CMAR approach when you've got this very diverse kinds of construction. You've got more control over who's going to do those different kinds of work. The other advantage that it gives you is that we can more easily stage the construction. So when we get the design done for, say, the site work, we can give that design package to the CMAR, and he can go get bids, and he can start that work while we're still working on the design for the water treatment plant. So it's a way to accelerate the schedule to get the work done faster. We want to drill these wells early. We want to get started with that. And so if we get that package done, we can go ahead and give that to the CMAR and let him go out and take bids on the well drilling and let that work start while we're still working on the rest of the design. So there's some different advantages to CMAR that we think is an advantage to the city and actually reduces your risk. There's other ways of doing it, and if you don't want to do it, we've got a little bit of money in here, about $65,000 or something like that, for really the effort. The additional different effort for us is at the front to help you get that CMAR on board. If you don't want to do that, we'll take it out. We don't have to do it.
Mr. King, what is the work to get the CMAR on board? Because it's $60,936. What are we getting for that?
So we're preparing. We have experts in our company who are experts at this kind of project delivery. They will help you, working with the city attorney, come up with the contract documents for the bid documents and the contract documents for the CMAR. We go through the bid process, or the proposal process, where the CMAR people, those construction managers, are usually general contractors that have that experience, that do that kind of work. They will submit qualifications to you, and you will make a selection of that CMAR based on those qualifications and some other criteria. There are general conditions and some overhead costs and things like that. So it's really the preparing all the documents. It's helping shepherd you, the city of Bastrop, through the process of getting this construction manager at risk on board. It's really the extra effort. It's an additional bid phase is what it is.
But you have to prepare the contracts anyway for the contractor, right?
Well, but this is in addition to what we would do we still have to do those contracts for the people that are going to do the work, actually going to do the construction. So your
The CMAR won't do those contracts?
The CMAR can do some of the construction, but generally what they're doing is working as, if you were going to remodel your kitchen, you could hire a general contractor to go out. He's going to get bids from the guy that does the granite and the tile and all that kind of stuff. That's what a CMAR does. They may do some of that work, but generally what they're doing is they're going out and they're hiring the different pieces to get the project done and then managing all that. And then they take the risk. They'll give you a guaranteed maximum price at about somewhere between 60 and 90% of the design. They'll give you a guaranteed maximum price, and they say, this is it. We will take the risk that the project doesn't go beyond this.
They also take the reward, right?
They can, yeah. But you can build your contract in to say if there's savings, because you'll have transparency in the prices that they're getting. If there's a savings, you can design that contract to share in that.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've heard the upside of the CMAR, but I mean, there has to be a downside. I guess I'm concerned if a problem occurs out in the field that the solution is going to drive it beyond that guarantee. Who absorbs that? Who absorbs that extra?
Well, if it's an unforeseen site condition, after the CMAR takes those bids and he's got his contractors lined up, it becomes pretty much a conventional construction project after that. So if you run into unforeseen site condition, if you run into rock that we didn't know was there, and the contractor has a claim for additional effort or whatever it might be, it becomes a kind of a conventional construction project at that point, and you'd handle it the same way you would any construction claim.
I guess that's my concern. If it's on site and there's a relationship between the CMAR and the sub, and the sub does sub-quality work, and the solution to it is going to drive it beyond the guarantee. Does the CMAR absorb that then?
CMAR's, that's what the at-risk part means.
Well, that makes sense to me.
He's taking the risk.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ennis?
There's one, I'm sorry, okay, let me answer your question, then I'll explain the other way we could do this.
You might answer my questions with that, but let me go in and ask these. So bottom line, the CMAR is not included in your services.
It is. right now. The preparing of the documents to retain the CMAR, to guide the city through the process of selecting a CMAR is in our service right now. It is.
So you might say you're a headhunter to find the CMAR. So
No, it's not something that we do. It's something it's a procurement process the city goes through, advertising, responses, evaluations, and then selection.
It's like an RFQ.
Just like an RFQ,
like a what?
a request for
Request for-
qualifications.
Oh, okay. So none of this fee summary here involves actual construction pricing.
No, this is
Just engineering.
This
et
is
cetera, et cetera.
engineering, it's survey, it's geotech, it's construction phase engineering, it's inspection, it's everything
Yeah,
from,
The whole project's going to be probably 50 million? What's the last estimate?
we estimated with contingencies and everything
Yeah,
else,
yeah.
construction at about 33 million, and then this engineering is on top of that.
Just checking.
Councilmember Rogers?
I wanted to touch a little, like Lyle said, I heard all these pros, but I haven't heard any cons. Are there some downsides to going this way? Because you told me all the positive things of going this way. You got to tell me that.
Well, the cons are, it doesn't make sense in every single situation. It has to be the right application. There has to be a driver. One driver often is schedule. And so if you've got an accelerated schedule, lots of times CMAR can help you with the schedule. In this case, like I said, we could prepare early out bid packages so that we could start construction sooner than if we were going to complete the entire design before we went out for bids, so we can start sooner and we can finish sooner. Another application, another advantage is a situation like this, where you've got lots of different kinds of construction that no general contractor is going to do all of it. And so the big concern here is that the guy that builds the water treatment plant is not the guy that's going to drill the wells. Those are two major pieces of this that you want to know who's doing it so that you're getting the best people to do that. We could prepare a bid package for the wells and go do that. We could prepare a bid package for the water treatment plant and go do that. Our effort is really about the same. It doesn't matter, other than, we would not be doing the CMAR part. The effort's about the same. There's work that overlaps those folks. If we structure it right, we could minimize that, and we could minimize the city's risk if we drill a well and the well doesn't produce the way we hoped it would, and we've got a delay because we can't start up the water treatment plant, and now I've got a construction contractor who's held up out there. I've got two issues going on, one affecting the other, and we've got a problem we have to solve. If it's all part of the CMAR, you don't have that issue. It's all under one control, cost control, schedule control, and everything for that by that CMAR. So we can do it the other way, traditional way, with different bid packages. We can do a bid package for the wells, we could do a bid package for the pipelines, we could do a bid package for the water treatment plant. It's just more coordination and, in my opinion, some additional risk for the city if something gets wonky between the different contractors.
But I didn't hear the downsides. You
Oh, on the CMAR?
You still told me the positive sides, but you didn't tell me the downsides of going that way.
You're not going to save any money doing this. Some people will tell you that it might cost a few % more. I don't know for sure whether that's true or not. You're not going to save any money doing it this way. The cost is not a reason to do this. The biggest reason that downside is that if you're not used to it, it's effort on your staff's part, on your attorney's part, on everybody's part, because you've never done it before. You can go to some place like New Braunfels Utilities, who uses it all the time. It's just part of their daily business. They do it a lot, and they do it for schedule reasons. Otherwise, there really isn't
Mr. Peter,
downside.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I must say that I've dealt with design build in the past, and back in that day, there was no such thing as CMAR. And I can see all the positives in having a CMAR, because with design build, you can get into some issues to where you got problems out there and your project is going to shut down, and there's no telling how long it's going to take to get it back online. So I'd like to see CMAR's personally, I'd like to see CMAR's way of doing business.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I have two quick questions, if it's okay, Councilmember Ennis. One, did you talk about CMAR when you bid on the work to begin with? Was this brought up when you were a part of the original proposal?
Back in when we made
When
our
Friese and
presentation
Nichols
to be
said, here's what we
selected,
think we
yes,
should do, were you counting on CMAR, or did you offer it as an alternative?
Well, we talked about that it was something that you might want to consider.
Okay.
We did a workshop back in October with the staff and talked about the differences. We had our construction manager come in and explain all this, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize that we're up here going, because we had no knowledge of any of
No,
that, which
I
is
understand.
certainly not your issue. And the other quick question that I had was, has our city attorney ever done CMAR contracts, and does your firm have experience with those?
Yes, Mayor and Council, we have. My last direct experience with it was that is the methodology the city of Dripping Springs chose to build their large rodeo arena and related properties, and they had a positive experience with that methodology.
Thank you. Councilmember Ennis?
And this may be too elementary, but what would you estimate the cost of a CMAR to be for the whole project?
Well,
And now, I won't hold you to it.
yeah, I don't have that even in my head, but what it essentially, that CMAR becomes the general contractor. So the general contractor's fees and overhead and profit that go into the project, instead of there being a general contractor, that CMAR is functioning as the general contractor, and so those fees are typical. You'll know what that is in a CMAR contract because they have to give you that at the beginning. They're going to give you the rates on their overhead and profit so that you can see that ahead of time.
But if we do the bid package route, separate bid package route, we won't have a general, there wouldn't be a general contractor.
Oh,
There
yeah.
wouldn't.
There's not going to be a
Well,
general contractor either way, right?
No,
No, you'll have a general contractor.
No, you're right in that if we prepare separate bid packages for the wells and the pipeline and the water treatment plant.
Won't you essentially end up with multiple general contractors?
You do essentially, but you don't. But it would be different than if I had a general contractor that I said, Mr. Contractor, I want you to go hire a well driller, a water treatment plant builder, and a pipeline builder under one agreement. It would be different. And he's right.
But a CMAR contractor is likely to be a regular general contractor on other projects.
Yes, a lot of your CMARs will be general contractors on other projects, but they also specialize in this kind of project delivery.
Can you rattle out, and I won't hold you to this, but it might be helpful to some of us, give us an idea, like, is Zachary a CMAR? What are some contractors that some of us may have heard of?
I can,
that are low, and I realize that there's a speciality in both the state-of-the-art water treatment plant and, well drillers. Not every town has we're into some specialized, but I feel like if I was looking at contractors that are likely to take on a water treatment plant and contractors that would be CMAR, there's going to be some overlap.
there would be. Yes, absolutely.
Which kind of gets us back to, why are we doing this? For me, the one true advantage is schedule, because you could start part ways, and then to Councilmember Peterson's point, you don't have all fingers pointing at the city when things don't line up, because either you're going to pay a CMAR to do it, or Mr. Job and the city manager are going to end up being the more than active project manager and having to figure out who's at fault. And I believe that's Mr. Peterson's concern. Am I understanding that correctly?
And a part of this I failed to explain very well, and really is another benefit to this, is that CMAR comes on board right away. I mean, shortly after, we would start procuring the CMAR as soon as we got a notice to proceed. Because we've got a preliminary design far enough along that we can tell the CMAR what we're doing. And so we would procure the CMAR, and then they're part of the team as we go through design. So as you get to design milestones on those different packages, they can tell us, we think this is going to cost X million dollars. And if it's not what we thought it was going to be, which happens sometimes, then we can work with them to say, what can we do to value engineer this? And we've got the input of a contractor all at the time. And so they're working with us on cost models, they're working with us on constructability reviews, so that as we go out to start construction, we've got a really good idea of issues we're going to run into. And when you do a straight design bid build, the contractors are usually our best QC reviewers. They're the ones that come and tell us that, you know, what you did here isn't really going to work. I'd like to know that earlier in the process. So.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, I see that your light's on. I'm also realizing that we've kind of interrupted you with 4 more slides. Would you like to finish and then we bombard you with some more questions?
Well, no, this is my fault because I started talking about this, and it's honestly, it's a small part of our agreement to this additional work to do that, but I wanted to talk about why it was in there.
Well, are you guys okay with let him finish and we'll come back because we won't be forgetting our questions.
Okay. Just to give you an idea, these are the leaders on our team. You've met Kira Isles and David Munn. They were here at the last meeting. Others that you haven't met, these are all really strong professional engineers who will lead different pieces of this design. There's a separate design leader for the lift station, one for the pipeline. David Munn, you met, will lead the design for the water treatment plant. Our sub GSI will be leading the design and the study work and the permitting for the wells. We've got 7 Arrows Land that will be out there acquiring the easements for the pipeline. We've got a really, really solid team. It's a very large team with lots and lots of moving parts and pieces.
So if you were awarded this contract, those are the people that we're guaranteed that
Yes,
Mr. Job's going to be interacting with?
Yep.
Okay.
No, these are not just names I put up here. These are the people that will be assigned to the project. And some of these, your staff has already met. Brent Miller, our construction manager, Jessica Vassar, she's been here. So the elements of the agreement, these are, we break these down as basic services and special services. Basic being the things that are kind of involved in every single project. So that's project management, it's the design piece, and the permitting assistance. I've specifically mentioned in here, we don't expect a contested case on the wells, but, and so our permitting on the wells is really the basic part of it. It's preparing the submittals, it's the answering technical questions from the Groundwater Conservation District. If it becomes a contested case, then we have to reevaluate what's involved there. Preparing all the design documents for all the different packages, that's part of the basic services. Bid phase services is part of it. And then our general construction engineering, which is reviewing shop drawings, it's reviewing pay estimates, it's periodic site visits to the site, it's all that kind of basic stuff that the design team stays involved with. And then all the post-construction stuff. It's the startup, it's O&M manual, it's the record drawings. Those are all part of the basic services. The special services are things that are unique to this project, and part of that's that CMAR procurement, and I've already said, you know, that's not a huge part of this, but it is additional, or not additional, but part of the special services. It's the water master plan, and I want to talk about that in a second, but let me finish this slide. It's water quality sampling, it's the surveying, it's the geotechnical, it's the land acquisition, and our construction management and inspection. And then our commissioning help when we get to that. So those are the special services, and I break them out that way so that you can kind of see what's involved in the design and then what's involved in all these other additional things that are kind of not typical. I've included the water master plan in this agreement. We did this after consultation with your staff. And I don't know how much Mr. Munn talked about it when he was here. We've done enough conceptual design work at the Willow plant to know that that pump station that's at the Willow plant is going to have to be expanded to handle the water that's coming from the new water treatment plant. It doesn't have to be expanded on day one, but in a few years, you're going to use enough water from the new water treatment plant that that pump station will not be able to push that much water out into the distribution system. The pumps are not big enough, and then as big a problem as the pumps is the pipelines leaving the Willow plant are not big enough to handle that much flow. So when we started our study, we thought, well, we can probably figure out what we need to do. Well, the problem is that solving a problem like that, it's not isolated to that pump station. It's a system-wide issue, and we need to look at how the system is going to be designed and built and expanded to serve your needs over the long term so that we can figure out what to do with that pump station. We could throw a Band-Aid on it, we could put in some bigger pumps, we could build one pipeline out and tie it in someplace where we can make it work, but I don't think that's what you should, I don't think that's the right answer. And so we've included a water master plan in this, which statewide, I don't think there's anybody in the state better than our master planners. They do a lot of it. And what we will do is we will study your system, we will take what we've done for population projections and demands and things like that, and land use and all the other things that go into it, and we'll start to look at your development patterns, and we'll say these are where you need to make improvements over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and build out in your system. Then knowing that, then we can give you recommendations on, let's do this at Willow, knowing that eventually you're going to build this new pipeline, or you're going to build this new elevated storage tank, or you're going to change your operation like this. And we can make a recommendation on what we do there that supports what you want to do long term in building out your system. I think it's
essentially
really
a
important.
water model, correct?
It's a water model.
And who owns that model?
You do.
That was the right answer, Mr. King. Thank you.
No, absolutely you do. We use lots of different modeling software. We'll use the one, if you have a preference, we will use the one that you want. If you don't know, we'll lead you through that process of figuring out what's the best one for you.
So if we have to acquire software to be able to run that model, that's an additional cost?
That would be an additional cost. We don't have that built in here because we don't know
I'm
what
assuming
you want.
there's no chance we have water modeling software. Would that be a correct assumption, Mr. Jobe? All right. Okay.
But it's not unusual. Lots and lots of cities are in the same boat. But I really feel like this is an important piece of this. It doesn't have to start day one when we start our design.
Got to have a long-term plan.
But it needs to get done in here so that, and I think it makes sense to go ahead and get it done so you know where you're headed and you can start to build that CIP program into your planning. We'll give you projects, we'll give you costs, we'll give you years, we'll give you milestones that say, when your population reaches this, it's time to do this project, and give it to you laid out in a map like that so that you can, and that's a pretty typical map.
Council, it could be a gift of strategic planning for future councils, and it allows us to validate the impact fees when a developer comes in, and we can show them real time, this is the impact, and that would be a way of assuring the community that they were not bearing the cost of future development, and
Absolutely.
that the developer asking for with the demand is picking up that tab through their impact fees. Am I correct?
Absolutely. This becomes an input into your impact fee calculation. So we lay out those projects over time, and you can see how much of this project is utilized by existing demands and how much of it is allocated to future demands, and that becomes an input into your impact fee calculation.
Okay.
There's a lot of benefit that comes from this, including if you've got an emergency or you've got an opportunity for a new development that wasn't on your radar, you can run the model and say, what do I need to do to serve that new development? Okay, so that brings me to the summary of our fee. We've laid it out. We prepare a very detailed task estimate, which I provided to the city by task, and we go through and estimate by person that was on that list how many hours we think they're going to have. And then this is the summary of that. Just to be clear, it's not a percentage of construction. It's literally a line by line, task by task, person by person estimate of the effort. And so this is where we're at.
It's a really big number, Mr. King.
Yes, it is. I know that.
And I think you have another slide, right?
Oh, I did, the timeline. So we have finished the design report. You can see the well field design is the very next thing that we would start. Our intent there is to get a set of specifications put together, the final well siting and a set of specifications put together so that we can go out and contract that well construction, because we want to get those wells drilled and find out what kind of water quality we have and make sure we've got good wells. And then that well permitting starts right away so that hopefully it doesn't become the thing that's slowing down the project. We'll try to shepherd that through as quickly as we can. We start on the design of the water treatment plant and the pipelines. The pipeline, there's a land acquisition that has to take place. That is almost always on the critical path of our projects. So we start that early, finalize the alignment, and start on that land acquisition so that it's not holding up the project, because it doesn't do any good to have a water treatment plant if we can't pump it into town. And then you can see the construction. So we've got, probably not quite a year's worth of design effort, and it depends on how you want to go about doing it, but I think there's, whether you do it CMAR or not, I think there's opportunities to put out early out packages so that we can get the construction going rather than feeling like we have to finish the complete design before we go out and get bids. So we'll do everything we can to shorten the schedule.
When I read this slide, it's probably not the way you want me to read this slide, but I read that slide that by March, April, May of 2023, I have a functioning water treatment plant. Am I reading that slide correctly?
My glasses might. No, yeah, that's, I mean,
it's not at the end of the arrow, it's at the end of the gray bar.
It's in the middle of the year, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is assuming that we get started with these early out bid packages.
Okay, let's go back to the fee summary slide, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm understanding correctly, if we're like, maybe we don't want to do CMAR, we would take out $60,936, and the schedule may or may not have to be adjusted.
I don't think we would adjust the schedule. We would just change the way we put together our bid packages. So we would.
Man, if I thought the CMAR was improving the schedule.
You're asking if we took out the CMAR, whether it would shorten the schedule or lengthen the schedule?
I'm asking if the schedule on the next slide is assuming that it's CMAR.
Well, the schedule on the next slide is assuming that we're letting out separate bid packages, whether it's CMAR or whether it's just a separate standalone bid package. So you can see.
So if we could do CMAR, we could pull it in a little bit, because I thought I understood that timing was one of the advantages of doing CMAR, because you could start some work before you had full design plans.
We'll do that no matter what. We'll do it whether it's a standalone package that contractor A goes and drills the wells, and contractor B goes and builds the water plant, and contractor C goes and builds the pipeline. We'll do those things whether there's a CMAR involved or not.
Good, because I was going to ask you, why couldn't you do that anyway? But so you're agreeing. Okay.
The only thing is now you've got 3 or 4 different separate contracts, and somebody who's been involved in the construction business and design business knows that if something goes wrong on one, and it affects the other one, I've got lots of stuff, and I kind of like the idea of having one party responsible for cost control, schedule control, quality control, and everything else, and that's one of the advantages of CMAR.
Okay, so based on that, and I understand, we're really early on to be committing that CMAR could save you 12 weeks in a 3-year contract, and I fully understand that. But for right now, if we said we did not want to do CMAR, the only line item we would take out is the $60,936, because you wouldn't be putting together CMAR procurement if we weren't doing CMAR.
That's correct.
Okay. And Alan, you're saying that this was done in Dripping Springs successfully for their rodeo, so you're familiar with this process?
Correct, Mayor. It's a fairly common process.
And I don't know who to ask this question to, so I'm just going to ask it, and whoever knows the answer is going to hopefully tell me. Is it seen as a benefit or a risk for a grant application?
That's a really good question.
What's the really right answer?
I don't know about the other programs. I do know about the Water Development Board and their SRF program. And we've done CMAR projects with SRF money in them, funded by SRF, and it's kind of a pain. It's kind of a pain. It makes things hard.
To be CMAR?
Yeah, the Water Development Board, because of the way they want to look at all the different bid packages, it does introduce some complexities. But we've done it, and so I wouldn't not do it for that reason. Here's another thing we could do, is if you're not ready to make that decision tonight on whether you want to do, you can, if you prove this, we can say, let's leave that out, or let's authorize that separately, or whatever you want to do. I can have one of our we're blessed to have 2 of the national experts on alternative project delivery at Freese & Nichols. I can ask, Chuck Wolf was on my list of people that would guide us through this. I can have him come over. We can walk you through this in a workshop, and you can make a decision. If this is the first time you've heard about it, thought about it, it doesn't have to be part of this decision. It's something that we would start early on, but we have time to make that decision. If it's something that you're not quite ready to say yes or no, it's a small part of this. And we can say, let's not talk about that part right now.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
And when I received the packet and looking at a project that we're committing just south of $5 million to, I wanted to do my homework, and certainly as a layman, there's a lot of things I don't understand, but one of the things I do understand is management and cost. And I could not find a lot of holes in the CMAR project, and I'm glad that Councilman Peterson fed into the conversation, because his insight is very, very good. But I guess it boils down to me to making sure we choose the right manager, and that we have that very, very sharp pencil.
Correct.
Is that part of the advantage? As a layman, that's what I read.
Is the CMAR? Is that what you're talking about? Yes. And so that CMAR selection is based largely on qualifications. You want somebody who's done it, who's got a good track record, of really good cost control input to the design process. And there are some really good ones out there, but yeah, you want to make that selection based largely on qualifications.
And that CMAR will be able to ascertain whether projects could be done concurrently as opposed to being sequentially.
Absolutely. We would work with that CMAR to say, this is the way we think would be best to do this. What do you think? And they may look at it and say, I don't like the way you're thinking about this bid package here. I think you should put this in it too. That's part of the design effort. We call it a collaborative design approach and collaborative project delivery for a reason, because it's a 3-way team. It's city, design, engineering, and CMAR.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ennis?
Is there a real simple way to tell us why the Water Board would have, it's more difficult for them to approve a CMAR project?
So Water Development Board, and they have issued draft guidance on how they're going to work with these. We were unfortunately one of the early guinea pigs on projects that we tried to shepherd through the SRF program, both on design, build, and CMAR. the Water Development Board wants to look at every package of work before it's advertised. And so if I develop a bid package for the wells, and I'm ready to go, I've got to wait for them to finish their review. And right now, those things are taking a long time. And so you've got multiple iterations of going to the Water Development Board to get them to review things instead of just doing it one time when you do with a, but we're going to have that anyway. If you do what we're suggesting here, where we're breaking this up into pieces, it's going to have to do that anyway. The part that you don't have to mess with is their involvement with the CMAR and reviewing the CMAR's contract and all that kind of stuff.
Do they have to review the CMAR contract?
Yes, any contract that you let that is going to use their funds, they have to review and approve. And depending on the source, well, this is not, so this will have to meet the requirements of their good faith effort programs and everything else. So it's complicated, and you've got a grant administrator on board for a reason. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they're giving you the money, they get to give you advice. Councilmember Jackson?
I'd just like to weigh in. I mean, particularly since we just made a major hire tonight with adding the city manager, I don't know. I mean, I know that Mr. Job will be working very closely with this project, but it's looking at the price tag and looking at all the moving parts to it. And if we don't have to make an immediate decision tonight or something, I'd like to kind of get some input from our incoming city manager, as well as the grants administrator, to see if they've had any experience with working with the CMAR project.
I think that makes sense. We don't have to do that tonight. I mean, obviously we'd like to get moving with the project, but if this is what's holding it up, my suggestion would be
it sounds like it wouldn't be difficult to put it on the CMAR port, because honestly, it's less than $61,000 out of $4.8 million. It is round off change.
I would be happy to resubmit this with that CMAR. Well, the CMAR procurement's already in the special services.
I think we could probably manage to do the math and approve the contract for a revised amount, and to Councilmember Jackson's point, put it on the next council meeting, or have a special workshop and get confirmation. Alan might be able to give us, he's excellent at giving us some bullet point summaries from his perspective. And Mr. Job, I know that we've recently gotten a grants administrator. We have one, but only because we approved it at the last council meeting, so we haven't had one long. And it's Langford, and so I'm certain that they've done some of these, but it might be nice to get their input as well. So that is, council, that stands before you tonight as one of the options. Councilmember Rogers?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the contract without the CMAR.
Second. And I'd like to ask a question.
Absolutely. We have a motion that we approve the contract less the basic and special services, less the amount of money for the CMAR. I'm doing the math, Trey. You should do it too, so we come up with a new contract number. And a second by Councilmember Ennis. And Councilmember Ennis, you wanted to ask another question.
When do we need to give you an answer on the CMAR? Since we've approved, we're going to probably approve this tonight the way it's looking.
I think if we knew something within 45 to 60 days, you won't have impacted the project significantly.
That's what I needed. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any other, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions? Councilmember Jackson, do you have any questions?
I still would like to get some input from our incoming city manager, but I mean, if we've got that much time, I guess that would work for me. I'm just a little hesitant, but I mean, it is just 60,000, like you said, but just to see if he's had the experience working with CMAR and.
Councilmember Jackson, the motion on the floor does not have the CMAR money included in it. That the motion on the floor has that removed.
I realize that.
Oh, okay.
But I was saying get some input from him. And then, which we can do, within the 45 days to see if he's had any experience with it. So that's fine. I don't think you were quite understanding what I said, but I hope I clarified it.
I thought you were saying that you wanted the city manager to have, new city manager to have a discussion about the CMAR, and I just wanted to make sure you knew that the motion was not including CMAR right now.
Right, and I was saying that I would just like to get some input from him in the future before we do make the decision on the CMAR.
Okay, I think we're all saying the same things. Is there any other comments or questions or discussion? Madam Secretary, if you will call the roll.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Mr. Job, what's the contract amount? Did anybody do the math?
$4,784,667.
$4,784,667. I just thought it was important that we get that number out there, that we're all clear on what we've just voted on. All right, Mr. King, you're going to be our new best friend. We're expecting
Thank you.
great things.
We're honored to be working with you, and we appreciate the opportunity, and we're excited too.
Thank you, Mr. King. Appreciate it. All right, council, it is 8:09. Do we need to take a quick bio break, or you want to rock and roll? Well, we need a quick bio break. It is 8:09. We are going to take a 5-minute break. We're in recess. All right, it is 8:14. Councilmember Jackson's here. We're all here, and we're going to get going. We are on item 5A, review rules of procedure for the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas. Council, we're all familiar with this document. We have approved it once a year. The first time that it was adopted was back in 2005, and it was not looked at again until October of 2017, and since that time it's been looked at and approved in 2017, 2018, 2019, and here we are in 2020. So all of you have had an opportunity to review this. It's very important that everyone understands that these rules of procedures are not only for City Council, they are also for boards and commissions. So any adjustments that we make would also be relevant as it can be relevant. It would be appropriate for impact boards and commissions as well. Shockingly, although Councilmember Rogers said I had 1 million changes, I only have 5 tabs. But I will open it up. Councilmember Jackson, is there anything you'd like to see revised in the procedures?
Not at this time.
Councilmember Jackson has no revisions. Councilmember Peterson, anything to be revised? Councilmember Peterson is okay. Councilmember Ennis?
I'm great with it.
Councilmember Rogers?
I'm good, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
You have to turn on your mic or Councilmember Jackson can't
I'm
hear
curious
you.
to hear the things that you found that I missed.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Your thoughts are much more organized than mine.
Oh, y'all are big. Okay, the very first question that I have is for our attorney. Is it beneficial or is it not necessary to add something about virtual council meetings, or do we just have that as a part of, it becomes a part of whatever, like we're in an emergency order now, so you just cover it in emergency order, or knowing that COVID's not going away tomorrow, would it be appropriate to add something about virtual council meetings and how citizens may at times not be admitted to the council chambers and how to do things online? Is that necessary, or is that not necessary in your opinion?
Mayor, I think it'd be wise to add a section regarding that. The fact is, right now, because we're under a disaster declaration, your orders about how we conduct meetings, plus the governor's orders set the stage for how we do this. But those orders may go away at some point, but there's no reason to think that COVID-19 is going away or that virtual meetings are going away. And so I would recommend some thought be put into adding that kind of material into this document.
I'd also like to provide that as an option for our boards and commissions, because some of them, some of us like being in person, and some of them are like, I'm so stinking busy if it's going to be a 30-minute meeting. And specifically, I'm thinking of with planning and zoning. Sometimes we critically need a meeting and we're not trying to impact a project. And if we can have a virtual meeting, that also frees up council chambers. I am intentionally not looking at Colin because I know that makes streaming of some meetings more complicated, and there needs to be some thought in that. So we may, I would personally be towards this is an option that's approved by the city manager instead of trying to specify in the procedure book which boards are allowed to meet virtually and which ones aren't, because I think things can change. But I just thought that it's not addressed and that might be something that we would want to address.
I think we should, because what many don't know, either telephone meetings or virtual meetings have been a tool for a very long time, and they're hardly ever utilized. I think that's a good generality statewide. I think people have been very uncomfortable with virtual meetings, even though that tool was there before COVID-19. Now I think you're seeing the opposite. People are wondering, why do I have to go to a meeting? Can't we just have this virtually? And so I think it's wise to start building that into our procedures as a possibility.
Well, I would like to look to you to help us with, and council, I would say words to cover us, but not too descriptive, because we need to have some flexibility, and our city attorney has proven to be quite excellent at getting that done. Is that all right with council? If we, Councilmember Ennis.
And Mayor, I think that's an excellent suggestion. Thanks for that suggestion. It really is something with this new normal that we have that would be very important for us to have.
Councilmember Ennis?
I don't mind putting together rules for emergencies, but I want to go on record that I will stand against allowing that to be a form of a valid meeting in going forward.
For council or boards and commission, or for anyone?
Any of us.
Okay.
I think if you're too busy to make a meeting, then you don't need to be serving on council, or you don't need to be serving on a board or commission.
So, Councilmember Ennis, what I hear you saying is if we are not under an emergency order, your expectation is that that quorum is in chambers?
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
I want to echo exactly what Councilmember Ennis just said. I think we need to have defined criteria to not have a physical meeting. I think it does not need to be based on the whim or wishes of the participants in that meeting. They just don't want to show up at City Hall or at the prescribed meeting place. So I would want to ensure that we have some level of criteria, whether it be emergency or disaster declarations in there that clearly delineates why we're having virtual meetings and not public meetings.
Certainly. And I'll remind the City Council that absent a disaster declaration, the Open Meetings Act allows for virtual meetings, but one of the requirements is that a quorum has to be present somewhere on the globe.
Physically?
Yes, physically present, and that the presiding officer, in this case the mayor, has to be present at a location that allows the public to attend. And so those are the normal rules outside of an emergency situation, but members can still remote in and still count toward a quorum and still participate, but you have to have a physical quorum somewhere.
But if you have a physical quorum somewhere, the virtual person's really not counting towards the quorum.
When you add what the number is, they're counted as present and participating. But no, that number doesn't make the minimum number for a quorum.
Okay. I can't wait to see how you have that written so that we all understand that.
Well, and they get to vote, which is, it's not a new development in the law. It's probably less than the last 10 years or so.
That they are not a part. Let's just use the example that Councilmember Jackson is not with us tonight. We certainly have a quorum, and Councilmember Jackson is allowed to vote virtually, but if he was not virtual, we would still have a quorum and the people here would still vote.
Correct.
And the meeting would be a legal meeting, and he would show as an absent. If
He would
he was not virtual, if there was no
Yes.
virtual aspect, he would be absent.
Correct.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, I thought you put.
And thank you for that explanation. I just, one of the hallmarks of our type of government is optimizing public participation, and that's what I want to ensure that we optimize that each and every time. So, but thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate that.
Councilmember Ennis?
I said my due.
Councilmember Rogers?
I had my light on to agree with Councilmember Ennis and Mayor Pro Tem about, if it wasn't an emergency time, I was just going to say that I agree with them. Now, my question on Alan is that your Open Meetings Act says that it's allowed, but can we require it? I mean, you're just saying what's allowed to happen, but can we put
Just
it in
because you can doesn't mean you have to.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's
Okay, let me
being
try.
asked.
Let me try. She is understanding that there is state law that says if you have a quorum present, you can have one of your members participate virtually. And Councilmember Rogers understands that that law is, but she's saying since it is allowed, can this council vote and say, nay, nay, if it is not an emergency, you must be present, and we aren't going to let a council person call in virtually. Is that possible, or is that against the state law? The allow is what's throwing her. She's wanting to know, does that mean it's our option, or it must be allowed?
There's some general language in the Open Meetings Act that allows city councils to adopt some procedural rules to govern their own meetings. I think through such a procedural rule, the council could require physical attendance. Also, the city council is in charge of things such as your web portals, your platforms, your technology. If you don't provide the means for someone to remote in, they can't remote in. So yes, I have not heard of that happening. I don't know an incident where it's come up, but I think a council could adopt such a rule for non-emergency situations.
Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, so council, we're not voting on this, we're discussing this. And I think it's only fair for Alan to know what to write. And what I hear the majority of council saying, a good spot for his verbiage to start is that virtual is certainly allowed, will be made available when possible during emergency declarations, but if there is not an emergency declaration, this council's procedures is saying that the preference is that the quorum be present here at City Hall. Okay, and we'll discuss that before we vote on it, but I think that's kind of what I'm hearing. Councilmember Ennis, am I wrong?
I'm going to say something else. I don't think Alan needs to do anything. If another emergency comes along, it's worked this time. Why do we need to put provisions in our procedures in order to deal with something that's been a once-in-a-lifetime thing up to this point?
Well, that's what I was just asking, is that something that we wanted to consider? But if you guys are not wanting to allow someone to attend virtually, then there is no point in putting anything. And Alan, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Is that?
I think it's a healthy discussion to have. I do, because I've never had this conversation with someone before, but we've never been confronted. The only time I've seen council members participate virtually in a meeting is when the entire council's in a room and someone's RVing in Utah, or they're at a conference in DC, and they've remoted in as the one-off who wanted to be part of the conversation, who wanted their voice to be heard. That's when you normally see this. Video conferences are an unusual circumstance in smaller cities. I think it happens more frequently in your larger cities like Austin or whatnot. But they still have to have a quorum present in one location. They still have to have a presiding officer somewhere the public can come.
So what I hear, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, well, I will just say the council that's in the room tonight is when you ran for office, you knew there were 2 meetings a month and you knew they were at City Hall. And if you can't be counted towards the quorum if you're not physically in the building, the truth is the meeting could take place whether you're virtual or not virtual. The meeting is still going to take place because you have to have a quorum in this building where the public has access to us. Is that correct?
Or any other place you designate. It could be at the Civic Center.
Sure, yeah, but it has to be a public place.
Yes.
Mayor
I think
Pro
our
Tem
city-
Nelson?
So, Mr. City Attorney, if a quorum is present, then the person participating virtually can still vote, is that correct?
Yes.
And participate in the discussion.
Yes.
So our current rules and procedures allow for such, or do we need to provide clarification within this document?
I don't think our current written rules address this at all.
That's why I brought it
And
up.
we're operating under both the mayor's emergency orders and Governor Abbott, through his emergency orders, temporarily suspended certain sections of the Open Meetings Act. And the requirement for a physical quorum is one of them.
Sure, Mr. Wood?
One comment, the question was made, do we need to have anything to address this issue in the procedures? If you want to prohibit the virtual participation of the 5th council member or 4th and 5th council members, you would need to add that because state law currently allows it.
Oh,
think
no,
that's a good point.
there's no suggestion of prohibition on my part. I want to make sure that it's inclusive as possible. So if we have a council member who is unable to attend due to geographic or physical conditions, I want to make sure that they're able to participate if they so desire because they were elected to participate. And I want to ensure and again, I was looking for clarification. If that's allowed right now, then we don't have to add anything. But if we need to add it in to provide clarity to future councils or to ourselves that somebody has the optimal opportunity to participate, we should.
And when I was reading through the procedures, the word virtual is not mentioned not even once, and that's why I brought it up. I believe we need to address it however you guys collectively want to address it. Councilmember Jackson?
I would like to see it addressed, and I'd like to see it added, because sometimes we have more than 2 meetings. So yes, statutorily, we say we're going to have 2 meetings, but what about those special meetings or things like that, or emergency meetings that come up? And there could be other circumstances that cause us not to be able to be physically there, but we could be there virtually.
Well, I
Councilmember Rogers?
would like to see what Alan comes up with, because I would like some part of it addressed in the book. You
I
know.
can't hear you.
I was just saying that I would like at least a subject addressed in the book. Let's see what Alan can come up with as wording. Just not to put it in at all makes no sense. I mean, because I think we'll be living with this, so I think it just makes it clear for not just this council, for the boards going forward. For a board member coming on, they read this, that way they feel secure on what they can and can't do. So if it's not addressed at all, then maybe they might not know.
They may assume one way or the other.
Right, so I think it's best that at least it's addressed to what this council wishes for our boards going forward.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that the rules are in place for 1 year, and it says specifically that they'll be reviewed every year. If they get, for some reason, they're left off the agenda, then they stay in place until they're reviewed, but they can also be updated at any time. So if something changes substantially, we can always go back and write them. So that was only tab number 1. Shall we go on? Emergency meeting, section 2.6 talks about effective September 1st, 2019. I think that can be taken out because I don't think anybody cares, so I think that needs to be cleaned up. And section 2.7 workshops says that questions will not be considered, and I think that the law says that we do have to allow them to talk, so I think that needs to be cleaned up from a legal standpoint. That's on page 5.
Ma'am?
Yeah, Councilmember Ennis?
Workshops, you say, mine says citizen comments and questions will be considered at the end of the prepared presentation.
Yeah, but if you read the sentence before, it says, will not be considered at a work session unless posted for citizen comment. And I think we don't have that choice. I think we have to post and give them the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
So, and however, I trust Alan to clean that up. That was, for me, that was a law thing, not a our wishes thing. My next little comment, I know y'all love me, is page number 12, and it's the paragraph right before 3.12. And it says disorderly contact as defined in section 42.01 TPC. And then the sentence is, the utterance of this language should rise to the level that a fight is imminent. And I think there's an unless that's missing in there. And what it says is, people are allowed to do free speech unless they start a fight, and then that's too far. But there's something about that sentence that doesn't read correctly to me, but it may be because I'm an engineer and not an English major. And then on 3.12, council may discipline its own members, and it talks about going into executive session, and you can come out and take no action, you can do private censure, you can do public censure, but it does not say how you get the agenda item on for the executive session. And so I don't know if that's if Mayor Pro Tem Nelson suddenly starts losing his squash and I want to censor him right now, do I just say, we're going into executive session, or does that have to be posted on the agenda with the 72 hours? Right? So it explains the consequences, but it doesn't explain how to get it on. To me, again, it could be just, and maybe it's you get it on the agenda like any other thing, but that kind of seems like a special thing, so I'd like to better understand that. On page 13, under agenda order, about the third or fourth sentence that says the goal would be to upload the agenda and packet on Friday. Councilmember Ennis, I think your preference is Thursday. So I think Friday needs to be Thursday. And note, staff, that it is a goal. We understand things happen, but the goal is for it to be Thursday. And in that next paragraph, agenda items must be provided to the city manager's office by noon on the 11th calendar day preceding the date of the regular meeting. But it goes on to say that if there's not enough time for staff, that it could be postponed to the next regular meeting. And 11 days is 2 days after the last council meeting. And I would like to offer up, isn't a week in advance enough? And if it's not enough, then you're going to push it to the next agenda meeting anyway. So the 11 days seems kind of excessive to me. So I would like us to consider 7 days, if anyone else agrees with that. I'm getting some nods. Councilmember Ennis, you okay with that? With 11 being 7? Okay. All right. The next one is on page 14. And a little birdie told me on the last paragraph on page 14, the city attorney, I believe there's some, it's nice try, but people are allowed free speech and they can come say, you are the worst mayor in the history of America. And if you think we need to clean up some of this language so that it's better advocates free speech, but that's not the same as, they can't come and throw tomatoes at me, but they can come say, I think you're a terrible mayor, and they're allowed to say that. So if you're okay with how it's written, that's fine, but I had understood that you thought we were on some shaky ground with some of this verbiage.
No, that's correct, Mayor. I think we are. I had flagged that one myself and was toying with is defame a better word than slur, and deleting the parts about the performance, honesty, or integrity. The fact is, recent legislation from the Texas legislature amended the Open Meetings Act to say that we cannot cut off criticism when members of the public are speaking during a city council meeting. So criticism toward the city, criticism toward the council, toward staff, toward me, is something that we have to endure. But I believe there's some unstated level beyond that the presiding officer can cut off the dialogue. I think defamation might be that point.
I think Councilmember Ennis is not liking that at all.
No, I don't like that at all. I've been through the wars. Councilman Peterson's been through the wars. I don't like that at all. We need to make this thing as tight as we can make it, because we've seen what can happen when people start going after each other on this dais and from down there, and it was repugnant. And this council cleared that up and brought some decorum back to this building. And I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to go backwards. If there's a way to do this without giving away the farm, I think we ought to do it, and I think we ought to make it as tight as possible within the law so that we don't get into those kind of problems again.
Councilmember Ennis, I just want to clarify that my understanding is this is not how council members speak to each other. This is a private citizen having a right to free speech that we can't cut off.
I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I said council and down there, because during that time period, it was everything.
So, Mr. Attorney, the concern is that we don't want to have, what I understand Councilmember Ennis saying is he wants it written as tight as it can be and still be compliant with the current law. Is that correct? Or do you want to go beyond the current law, and if someone says, you can't tell me, I can't call you a liar, I'm going to sue you, then where does that put us?
I don't think we should be subjected to being called liars or defamed or untrue statements. It may be their opinion, but I don't think you ought to be personal about it.
Well, I would suggest that if anyone, including myself, a staff member or a council member, actually did lie, we are subject to being called out on that point in this room. And anyone who cannot stand up to that needs to wonder whether public service is the place to be.
There's a difference between being called a liar and saying, I'm sorry, but I believe that's untrue.
I think that the Texas legislature has spoken about what we have to endure and what we don't have to endure. There are many parts of our procedures that you've adopted that I think will continue to achieve the result that you're speaking toward, Mr. Ennis. 3.9 is a section on courtesy, decorum, and order. And I have not suggested any changes to that. In particular, there's the line at the end of subsection 2, the mayor has the right to cut off a speaker if the discussion becomes too personal, too loud, too crude, irrelevant, impertinent, redundant, or slanderous. I think our mayor or mayor pro tem, when acting as presiding officer, still has that power. But to put something in our code of procedure that is on its face contrary to state law is something I would recommend against.
I'm not looking for something that is contrary to state law. What I'm looking for is to design this so it is as tight as possible and does basically, like you said, if 3.9 is what it is, then if that does essentially the basics of what we've had, the way we operate now, then I'm fine with that. I just don't want to loosen things up so much that, and I personally don't think that, I'll go on record, I personally think that being an elected official does not, should not open you up to defamation and slander.
I agree. That's why in that one section 4.7, I was thinking about, that's what I made in my notes to our city secretary this afternoon, was changing slur to defame, because that is something that's actually defined in Texas law. It's defined commonly, and I think that's something that helps strengthen our decorum policy. I also think in addition to the written policies that we have, the way this city council and your staff conducts themselves each and every meeting truly does set the tone for everyone that comes in here. And it's something that I'm very proud to be a part of. Having written rules is one thing, absolutely. Behavior is another, and this council always exhibits the best of behavior. I think that there are other cities and other local governments that if they don't like what the citizen has to say, they cut them off, and if they don't shut up, they call on the police to throw them out of the building. Just because they don't like what that citizen has to say, just because they don't like the criticism. Well, for people like that, they've got a very receptive audience at the Texas legislature, which is why they amended the law this last session to say, no, we have to take criticism, we can't cut it off. But there is a line beyond just fair criticism, and I agree with you, we should try to discourage that and have something in our rules that say we're not going to tolerate it. And then we hope that our presiding officer is paying attention and has good judgment in that regard.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Jackson?
and as far as on the dais, that does not our ethics policy cover us with that so that we are civil with one another through the ethics policy, or is that, am I wrong in assuming that?
I don't think that's correct, Councilmember Jackson, because the citizen that walks in is not covered by the ethics ordinance.
No, I said for us on the dais. For the council members, in other words.
Yes, sir, I understand who's on the dais. I guess you're saying, is it unethical if I say, Councilmember Jackson, I believe what you just said is not untrue, and I don't think that's unethical to the attorney's point. If what you just said was untrue, I think I can politely say, I don't think that's true, and here are the facts. So I'm not sure, how are you seeing the ethics ordinance covering this?
No, I was just, from what I understood Councilmember Ennis to say, it wasn't the citizen that came forward, but he was also concerned about those of us on the dais. And so I was saying that as far as covering that portion, I thought we were covered with the ethics. But is that clear?
I don't know.
Or does that make sense to you, Councilmember Ennis?
Yes, sir. You hear me?
So what's the ethics ordinance covering? Councilmember Ennis, help me understand, because I'm not following the conversation. Are you just and I can't imagine this council ever doing it, but a council member calling out another council member on the dais, you think that the ethics ordinance covers that?
I believe so. Doesn't it?
I believe Councilman Ennis and Councilman Jackson, there's some aspirational language in our rules. The Code of Conduct talks about city officials conducting themselves in a manner that fosters public trust, performing their duties in a way that projects a high level of personal integrity, must avoid behavior that calls their motives into question. So there is some aspirational language we can point to in our Code of Ethics. I don't believe there's anything specific along these lines regarding your conduct at a meeting. And so I think we need this. And I definitely like the rules of decorum that we have in here. I just want to have the opportunity to come back next meeting with some language that we can tweak it, and you can let me know, are we still maintaining decorum while also not on our face going contrary to the new language of the Open Meetings Act?
Is that agreeable to you, Councilmember Jackson? Yes, and everybody's nodding yes? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Mr. City Attorney, I just want to make sure some of the language in the second paragraph of 3.11 is inconsistent with what we're discussing in this section, in 4.7, especially regarding profane language. 3.11 says the legislature has determined that profane language is allowed, and yet in this section it says it won't be allowed. I'd just like to achieve some consistency there is all.
Sure, I don't know that profane language, obscene language is something that state law requires us to tolerate.
Well, whether or not we tolerate it or not, it says that it's allowed under disorder, it's not defined as disorderly conduct. I want to make sure it's really clear that while we won't tolerate it, it's not something that falls in the purview of disorderly conduct. I guess I'm trying to say, well, I'm practicing law without a license. I'm just saying that I would like to see those two sections, the language be consistent in there so that we provide a consistent message.
Correct, and I see what you're talking about. It's talking about Texas Penal Code 42.01. Just cursing out loud is not itself disorderly conduct, right, and does not justify being ticketed or worse based on that offense. I think one expletive here or there that's just what it is. Someone blurted something out loud. There's also the provision in the penal code that says purposefully disrupting a public meeting is a crime. And so someone were to do that over and over and try to behave in a way, whether it's vocally or physically, to stop you from conducting business, that is a separate offense for which our police department has the right to escort them out of the building or more. So I understand, but I don't think disorderly conduct is the only threshold that they're subject to.
You know, I'm all about clarity.
Yes, sir.
That's what it is. Can I address the ethics issue real quick?
Please.
My feeling is on the ethics issue, the only time that can be actually brought up is if somebody files an ethics complaint on someone. Am I correct? We can't just cite that as part of our rules of procedure, can we?
I think that you can cite it as something you want to comply with. You can borrow some of the aspirational language from it. We all should aspire to comply with it. But no, the main way that is enforced is if someone actually files a complaint alleging a violation.
And in spite of this sounding somewhat troublesome, dadgummit, I'm glad you said that.
No profane language.
I'm sorry.
Okay, and then you guys will all be happy. This is the last tab. On page 16, the rules governing citizen comments, we don't talk about the citizen comment card being online. And so I think when it's due and that that you can complete it online, and I think we may need to clean some of that up. And number 7 on the top of page 17 talks about no placards and banners. And Alan, you and I discussed at one point that we don't allow PowerPoints. If a citizen comes in, we can't have them just plug in a thumb drive because we don't know what's on the thumb drive, and it could be inappropriate material for a city council meeting. And we had talked about that at one point, and I didn't see that in the procedure, so I thought we might want to add that. Council, are y'all okay with that? And what we had said before is if someone has if they're here promoting and they've got a little 30-second and it's a sweet, if it's something that's promoting something that we would let them say within the 3 minutes and they submit it in time, ample time for it to be reviewed, we could allow it. Or we can just say, nope, you need to get as an agenda item. I want us to be clear because I don't want it to ever be, oh, well, I'm mad at citizen A, so I'm not going to let them do something that 2 months later we're letting citizen B do. I think we need to be consistent, whether it's a PowerPoint or a video. So I would offer that up as the things that I think maybe we should consider. And there is not a requirement that we approve it at the first meeting in July. There's a lot going on. Mr. Attorney, would your preference be to maybe review it at the second meeting in July, or you think July 14th is a reasonable time frame? Because we'll keep using these rules until we adopt new ones.
Sure. If we can move to the second meeting, that would be helpful.
Council, I'm fine with that. Councilmember Jackson, are you okay with the second meeting? Okay.
Mayor? It's a minor one, but I'm going to bring up one that our city secretary pointed out correctly. There's language in section 2.8 regarding keeping of our certified record of meetings, including executive session. It says indefinitely. Our state law records retention schedule says 2 years. And so I've recommended to Ms. Franklin language that says that a certified record of a meeting will be created by the presiding officer or designee, sealed and kept in accordance with the city's records retention schedule. That way, if that schedule ever changes, automatically this language will change.
Good catch, Madam Secretary. Thank you. All right. I know y'all are happy.
Mayor.
We're done with 5A. Yes, sir.
I actually have a lot of items I want to talk about with Alan, but they're just terms and some of that are not quite consistent. But there's 2 questions that I think would help Alan. The first one is staff is going to comply with whatever deadline council sets for when items need to be submitted. But I just wanted to explain, I wasn't here when that was done, but my guess is that since council has pushed back, I guess, the time when the agenda has to be posted or pushed forward, however you look at it, then really if you do the 7 calendar days before the meeting, that would be Tuesday. And so there's only 2 days before the agenda gets posted when an item gets submitted.
And I'm suggesting that it may be like, hey, give us an update on Main Street, and you were planning on doing that anyway. And if it's, hey, tell me how many sets of whatevers there are, you're going to say you need to go to the next council meeting anyway, because it gives the latitude that if you can't get it done, you can't get it done.
Right. I just wanted to point out, I think that's why it was done that way, because of the issue of moving the agenda time up, because...
But it was 11 days when it was on Friday.
Well, Friday's still an extra day above and beyond what state law requires.
The Friday to the Tuesday?
Right. Right. So now it's 5 days the way that it's being done currently. And so it really only ends up being about 2 days before the date the agenda
I understand.
goes up.
I'm just thinking if it's not a real easy one, it's going to get pushed anyway. So.
Yeah, it's most likely. And then the other one, I made the comment earlier, but I'm not clear, and so I don't know if Alan is. There were two different statements made about the idea of one council member, or two, I guess, if there's a quorum present, being able to participate virtually. At one point, I thought it was stated that council didn't want to allow that. And then it was
I
stated.
think we're going to talk about it when we vote on it.
Okay. Okay. I'm just making sure because just to make it easier on Alan as far as preparing the language.
Sure, thank you.
All righty. 6A, receive presentation on the unaudited monthly financial report for the period ending May 31st. Ms. Waldron.
Good evening.
And if you're following at home, that starts on page 11.
Yes, so in your packet, you have detail and notes of the period ending May 31st, 2020. I'm going to hit the highlights on this report. As you can see, the economic indicators are not that great, but we're not overly surprised under the circumstances. On the revenue side, in our funds, the Vehicle Equipment and Replacement Fund is behind forecast, but that's our own personal doing because we transfer money over to the VERF fund, so that will be cleared up when we start making those transfers again to ourselves, so I'm not too worried about that. The HOT fund is behind forecast, and yet again, that one's not overly surprising. And then the cemetery fund. On the Parks Trail land dedication, that is a correction that I found and had to make from fiscal 20, so that's why those numbers are crazy, but it just had to do with how the lease was being recorded and allocated.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
I can, but it's an accounting thing. I know you love that. When we signed the lease for the county for the property at Mayfest, it's a 75-year lease, and they prepaid it. And so when you prepay a lease like that, accounting rules require that you bring it into revenue as you earn it. So, and I had a calculation on my revenue that I brought in last year, and so I had to fix that this year. But it's literally like $1,300 we get to credit ourselves each year. So that was a correction on my part. I was reviewing something and found that there was an error there. So that's why that $15,000 is there. So it will slowly be corrected. It's corrected this year. Going forward, it'll be $1,300.
Councilmember Rogers?
I have a question about the vehicle replacement fund. Was there a reason why we haven't been paying that? I know,
Yes, it was put on hold because it's an internal transfer within the city.
Okay, I was just making sure.
It was a COVID. It was one of those things that we put on hold.
My understanding was that we were just not purchasing, not that we weren't funding it.
No, we put on hold any internal transfers, anything that we were paying ourselves until we.
Was that something that the finance committee did?
It was something that was on the list when we came to you back in March. April 14th, sorry.
It was to keep the money in general fund.
It was just basically not to pay
I know. I
ourselves
just wanted to look back on
until
it.
we were able to update
I
and
understand.
get
Thank you.
updates. Go ahead.
Trey's moving forward to a list of the items
Okay.
that were offered up and that, just so that list is available to you.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure. I understood what we said compared to what you said, so I'm
Yeah, it
fine
was
with it.
just
I'm not
an
arguing with you. I was just
Internal transfer.
I was just asking.
Yeah, and that will be cleared up on the next report. On the expense side, actual to forecast, we're all positive. General fund as a whole is about 8% to the positive. On the sales tax for this particular reporting period, we're still 1.5% above our forecast. Property tax is slowly catching up, but it's still 2% below the forecast, or well below the budget at this point. Water
And
waste.
is likely to stay there, correct?
It is gaining. We're closing the gap, but we will not completely close the gap, no. Water wastewater fund, 10% to the positive as a whole, and their revenue is about not quite 2.5% over forecast, so that fund is doing well. The electric fund is overall 4% to the positive. Their revenue is running actual to forecast about 2.5% behind, but I do want to point out, when LCRA pushes a credit through to us, and we push that credit through to the customers, our forecast in our budget was what we set as the forecast in the budget. But yet, when we have to push these credits through to the customers, we're going to see a decrease in revenue. So I claim a lot of that to some of these credits that are being pushed, which is a good thing for us, and it's a good thing for our customer. You're also going to see a reduction in the LCRA bill that we have. So it offsets itself in the fund. But just wanted to point that out.
Have we seen a decrease in usage?
I will need to look at our consumption comparatively, but I have to kind of factor in like new houses going on and make sure that I'm removing those, but I'll look at it.
I know people haven't let their businesses go, completely with non-climate air, but I'm wondering, some of the big retail businesses, when the door's not getting open and closed, and, do they have it a little high? And I just wondered if our consumption was down from, especially people paying at a commercial rate.
Well, then you have more people staying at home using up the air conditioner then.
Well, not necessarily, right? It's, so that's a very good point. I just wondered.
I've seen some of our bills lower, so I can only assume that it would be the same with other people, like our city
I was just
bills.
curious. I was just curious.
Yeah. The hot fund is, as far as the expense side, it's fine. Of course, on the revenue side, we're almost 25% to the negative, and I'm debating on, I'm bringing a budget amendment the next meeting, and we'll probably bring a budget amendment for this fund just so that we can bring that revenue down and make sure that we're offsetting the expenses against it. But that's all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
Council, any questions for Ms. Waldron? Councilmember Jackson, you okay? He's good. All right. Councilmember Ennis, did you have a question? You're alone.
No.
Okay. I just was making sure. All right, moving on to item 6B, receive an update from the City of Bastrop Chief Financial Officer on the forecast of fiscal year 2020 general fund budget due to COVID-19.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to address council on that
Certainly.
before we get started. We are entering a dangerous period right now. I think we had 5,500 new cases in Texas today, and in light of that, last week this is an item where we need to change the operating procedure that we put in place in lieu of the COVID diminishing of our revenues. And last week I contacted city staff asking them to provide me with some information that would make it easier for council to address this particular item.
Yes,
to
sir.
date, I have not received that information, and I would like to make a motion to pull this item from the agenda, put it on next meeting's agenda as a item for individual consideration.
So I have a motion to pull the agenda item.
Second.
A second. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Ennis,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson.
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 6C, receive monthly development update. Mr. Job.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let's get started.
All right.
So you're very familiar with our mission and purpose statement, so we'll just skip right past that. And this is from March to May. We haven't had an update in a while, so we just want to give you some quick numbers. As you can see, year to date, we've had 640 permits issued, but during this COVID era, we've actually 328 of them have went through. So that's every permit you can think of. That's drainage permits, it's land development permits. That also includes your trade permits. So business as usual, pretty much.
Mr. Job, thank you for bringing that up. Council, when we get to item 9A, that's a really important thing to note, that although particularly this building has been closed to the public, we are still issuing permits and doing business. So I was really happy to see these numbers. Thank you.
I think you'll actually see we're ahead of where we thought we were going to be.
Excellent.
Already this year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Pre-development, again, 21, and pre-applications, 20. These are some of the new certificates of occupancy that were recently issued. We've got 918 Main, which is one of our seamstresses that also provided us with a great mask. We have 704 Main. We also have Equipment LLC, the Learning Center, Sylvan Learning Center there at Agnes. The YMCA has a new building. I'm sure everybody was there for the ribbon cutting. And the Hunters Crossing Apartments, actually buildings 3, 4, 5, 7, 11, 12, 13, and 14, is a pretty big feat and a lot of inspection over the last 3 months. Again, Old Austin Highway and the professional building.
Family Dollar. You skipped over Family Dollar.
And the Family Dollar.
And the Family
That's correct.
Dollar.
There's also
a lot of
Family
people
Dollar.
are happy about that.
Yes. As you can see, some ongoing commercial projects. We're very close at the storage. I think the last time you saw this, it was just steel erected in the air. I wanted to make sure we had an arrow there because it's not the ER. As you can see, the ER sign is on their property, so remember to go down one more building if you're looking for the emergency room. We've got 921 Main Street, which is an EDC project. It's progressing nicely. We've got the Austin Regional Clinic, which we talked a little bit about at the last meeting. That's just now breaking ground. We've got Quick Trip, which is here in the future, and that is going to be right across from the Walgreens. I'm sorry, CVS, not Walgreens.
Yep,
right across from the CVS. We should see them starting fairly quickly. Just to give you a breakdown of residential projects, there was 282 residential lots in Pecan Park that have been platted. So they are very busy. They've got actually 3 builders, I believe. We've got 77 at the Piney Creek Bend. You've got, we also approved their public improvement agreement, if you remember at the last meeting. So that's an additional 93 lots you should see very shortly. So all the projects are really moving forward. If you've noticed, Riverwood Commons is also under construction. They're off Old Austin Highway. And the Preserve, there are 140 of those units, all the buildings we just talked about that are complete. So lots of places for people to live, and they're all filling up really quickly.
Yeah.
Upcoming and new, I thought we could talk a little about our software. The first phase that you'll see rolled out is actually is the permitting and inspection along with the electronic plan review. And I have a calendar in here where it says we actually launch beta testing on the 29th. And what that means is our beta tests are going to be our engineers and our home builders that are the volume builders that are about 80% of our business. So we're going to bring them on first, let them give us some input so we can have some fans. And during the 2-week period where we're bringing everybody else on, we'll start a marketing campaign. And during that marketing campaign, you'll see certain emails go out. You'll see stuff going to the bill stuffers. We'll send email blast to everybody that's in our current database for the last year.
The Building Bastrop database?
The Building Bastrop database, but also all of our people that are currently registered with the city on our old software. So we have all their information, so we're going to make sure they know, hey, we can have a separate email. It's going to be live on the 17th of July. And they'll be able to start signing up. In the meantime, while people come in independently or individually, we'll enter that into the system for them.
Mr. Job, I know, and Mr. Wood mentioned that that staff is doing a lot of training. Is there going to be training for people like, council members so that they can pull up reports?
We can absolutely get you some training. So we can put you, we can line you up as an end user. And we can do that.
I just think that eventually, and we can do that, y'all can decide how you want to do it. It could be a future work session right ahead of time. But if part of the council deciding to use city tax dollars to invest in the software, it'd be helpful if we can use it, because if we can pull up and get an answer, that's a phone call we're not making to city staff, and we're not wasting city staff time. And that's part of the advantage of having that. And I also think it would be beneficial when people come to us and say like, oh, I really like that permit, or I had a problem with this. I'd like to kind of have an idea of have seen what they've seen. So I don't want to rush you on that, but if maybe some council orientation, and everybody may not be interested, it doesn't have to necessarily be a mandatory meeting. And I don't know if it's online training or whatever, but if you and Mr. Wood could just kind of put some thought into that. Council, is that something you would be interested in? Okay. just trying to save you guys some time, take advantage of that.
Sure. So in our next phase, we're actually absolutely going to bring in some training. So we're going to shoot videos and things of that nature. We were also planning, there's also, if you log in, there is a MyGov University that walks you step by step what to do if you want to make a complaint, things of that nature. And that's really what the phase 2 is about. So we'll be doing the request manager at that point, which is
Great.
exactly what we're talking about. So we'll be bringing that on, as you can see. My eyes aren't as good as they used to be, so I believe that's the 29th. And I can't really tell from here. But
Yeah.
the point is, once this is brought on, we'll be providing that kind of training. And we'll be glad to have a session.
In July, it's the 20th.
The 20th? Okay.
The 29th is Monday, and that's why you've got that in your mind. The
Gotcha.
June 29th is a launch.
So that is the phase 2 launch, where everything will be brought back onto line. It will be full-blown permitting, end user, request manager. You can request a pre-app online, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Now, the next section, as we go through, we'll be bringing on our work order modules. Our work order modules is what the public works guys are going to utilize. If you want to input a pothole, things of that nature, that's going to happen through this work order module. Also through the request manager, we'll bring that live. We'll also do some training on that for the folks. And then report creation. So everything will be brought on. And I have that on the calendar for the beginning of phase 2, August 7th. So what that does is did I pass something out?
No,
Oh.
it was funny. Colin's-
Oh, it's Colin's trying to keep up, sorry.
Both of them have the same heading, so I kind of got lost in the picture.
Right, so, and what that's going to do is we will, again, have another campaign. We'll bring that online. We'll spend the next 2 weeks educating the public. Want to make sure we have a lot of social media. We'll really focus on people that are residents, and we'll send out to everyone that has a electric bill, water bill, things of that nature. So it'll be customer specific to the city residents to make sure they know how to input potholes and things of that nature. And I think that'll be a good time to probably work in some council training in between. I don't think you'll be applying for a lot of permits, but you will want to see how to look up reports.
Oh, yeah.
Things of that nature. So I think this is a good point.
We don't want to slow anything down. We just, when it's appropriate, we want to be able to utilize the system to
That's right.
save you guys some time.
And what we didn't talk about, when it goes live, you can actually, there'll be a GIS component, which the database is not built yet, but as we go in and permits are issued or something is happening on that specific lot, you'll be able to go into that GIS component, click on the lot, and it'll tell you what's happened there. There's been 2 code compliant complaints. There's been 1 pothole complaint by this particular address, and they've issued 2 permits. So that's the kind of information you're going to be able to get, and everybody will be able to get. And as part of the train, all the citizens would like to look it up. You won't see the back end. You won't know who's doing the inspection, but you will see that there's been an inspection there, or even give you a name of what the business is possibly.
Fantastic.
Again,
Councilmember Rogers, did you have a question?
I was going to wait for him to finish before I told him how wonderful I love this.
oh, well, great. So we're gonna, that's always good to hear early. So again, phase 2 will go live, and that's where we'll really push the open. You'll also be able to do open records requests through that. You will be able to issue work orders, and you'll be able to see if there's any code compliance issues on that piece of property. With that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Now
Councilmember
it's my
Rogers?
turn.
You want to say it again?
I was going to say, I really appreciate you putting all this in the PowerPoint, because we've been hearing about this software you wanted, and we heard how much money it cost. So it was really nice to see all of it working and how much it was going to do for you. So thank you for making it clear and exciting.
Good, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
I really appreciate the work that y'all put into this, but as you're putting these tools into the tool chest for planning and development, I still don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we need some ongoing training with interfacing with our citizens and developers that come in to make sure that that's a positive experience.
Absolutely.
So I really want to keep emphasizing that, because I want people to go away from dealing with the city of Bastrop feeling good that they accomplished something, and they're going to be generous supporters within our community.
Absolutely. And as part of that, we'll actually have a kiosk in the lounge, in the sorry, a kiosk in the planning lobby.
It was an L word.
What you'll be able to do is go in there, and we'll have some person interaction, again, help people input stuff until they get used to it. And that's really going to be your one-offs when it's just a citizen that comes in. Majority of our volume builders do this in several Central Texas cities.
And they're looking forward to it being
And they're
online.
looking forward to it. It's going to be much faster. It's going to save them the cost of paper. We're going to be able to look at the reviews all electronically. Everybody's really excited, and the staff has put in an enormous amount of work.
What percentage of your staff do you think is trained at this point?
I think everybody has had a good bit of training. I'd say our permit and inspection folks probably are the most trained because they've entered the most data and had the farthest to go. But the public works staff is also very familiar with the work orders. We just wanted to make sure the request manager was up to snuff before we released it to the public.
I think that's excellent. Councilmember Ennis?
Does the fire inspector have to go through this as well?
He does.
Has he done it?
Yes, he's been in training as well.
Okay, thank you.
Colin, I can't see Councilmember Jackson, so Councilmember Jackson, do you have any questions for Mr. Job? Okay. Didn't want to forget you. Just an excellent update. Thank you.
Great,
It was
thank you.
nice to see permits and everything else. It's been a while since we'd gotten one. Thank you.
Trey,
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Peterson?
first of all, just a comment. I think it's a great program. It's gonna kind of bring us out of the dark ages. And people
It will.
And yeah.
Yes.
With a second point is Piney Creek subdivision. I have maybe some issues or some questions about Piney Creek. They have hauled in a lot of fill over there. I mean, it's almost back-to-back 18-wheelers. And I wonder, is anybody monitoring that traffic or monitoring the drainage in that area to make sure that they're doing the right thing in there, to make sure the drainage is going to work, and who's going to repair our streets, because they're beginning to look pretty bad over there.
And Linden Street is looking very rough. I
Yes,
don't disagree.
I've got it on my list of Linden Street.
The part of the haul off is coming from one of our projects. We'll probably be responsible for going back and repairing the street since we messed it up. The drain, they haven't approved Lomar in the Piney Creek subdivision, and all of that drainage calculations have been worked out, figured out previous to the approval of the construction documents. Also, it's all worked out in our PIPA. They've got up all the erosion controls, and Mr. Pallady goes there once a week, make sure things are still in place. He is on the contractor daily on both ends at the Piney Creek subdivision and at the detention pond to make sure they keep the roads swept and scraped. I will tell you, it's difficult, but they're probably 3/4 of the way done with the hauling. And he thinks they have another, he said 5 days. I'm going to say let's make it 10 if the weather holds out. But if there's another 10 days of hauling, then they'll start reshaping, and it should get a lot better. We'll go and make sure it's cleaned up before they do anything else. And then we'll take care of those road issues. It looks like there's a sewer line issue in that road, which is causing it to fail. Yeah, I noticed it. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Job? All right, thank you. All right, council, we're going on to citizen comments. It's 9:15. Everybody okay? Everybody's okay. All right, citizen comments. One of the things, when I was going through the rules and procedures, I think it's on page 16, it says on the citizens' comments that if I review it and what they're asking about is not city business, that I can direct them the right way. So I had a very nice conversation with Miss Vest, Donna Vest, made a submission of a citizen comment today at 3:02 p.m. and I am not reading her citizen comment because it wasn't city business. I called her back and told her who to talk to, and she was thrilled I called her back. So I wanted to be forthright that she had filled out the application, but she was satisfied with calling somebody who can actually help her. All right, I am going to be reading citizens' comments. Do you have your timer, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson? I don't think we'll need it tonight except for maybe one. This comment is from Joan Armstrong, who lives at 1504 Water Street here in Bastrop, and her comment is as follows. I need to work in a protected environment so I don't bring anything home to my 84-year-old father. Most people don't want to bring anything home to their loved ones or spread anything to the public. Please enforce the use of masks in places of business. The next comment is from Christina Larson at 1411 Old Sayers Road, Bastrop, Texas. And her comment is the following: please make mask mandatory again. I notice people haven't been taking this outbreak seriously since masks were removed. Thank you. The next comment is from Maria Montoya Hohenstein, and she says she is at 920 Main Street, And her comment is as follows: as a business owner, I need the support of the City of Bastrop regarding face mask compliance. Right now, it is on each business to enforce a, quote, mask required, unquote, policy. This causes confrontations in addition to making COVID-19 infections worse in our community. In order to keep our businesses open during this pandemic, we need everyone to mask up in public places. The next comment is from Robin Snyder, who is at 289 Pecan Acres Road in Bastrop, and her comment is, I don't know if it's a her or him. Robin Snyder's comment is, please do not, in capital letters, require face mask. Please allow businesses to make their own choice to require or not to require mask. I do not believe it is the role of our county officials to decide this on behalf of private businesses. Private businesses have gone through enough already, with so many of them having to shut down. During the early stages of this issue, some suffered such a big financial hit that they have never been able to reopen. Parks should also be mask-free. It's outdoors. Requiring proper distancing or limiting the amount of people allowed in should be enough. On another note, thank you, capital letters thank you, for reopening the dog park. I visited the park again last week with my dog. She was overjoyed to be playing with her dog friends again and on the agility equipment. I shared the news of the dog park reopening on the Bastrop bulletin board, and my post was viewed by over 53 people. One person commented that she was there with 12 other people one evening. Please keep our dog park open and mask-free. The next comment is from Jeffrey Staten, who is at 920 Main. I am one of the many businesses that would like wearing protective masks against COVID-19 to become mandatory, not voluntary, in public places, such as all businesses. We are a relatively small city, but we get traffic from Houston, Austin, and San Antonio daily. We want their business, but not the virus. Mandatory masks allow business owners a less confrontational way to keep our places of business COVID-free, which keeps Bastropians alive and well. Thank you. Next comment is from Susan Perkins, 172 Ponderosa Road. People from other cities where COVID-19 is more prevalent travel through Bastrop on a daily basis. In order to limit the spread of the virus, all businesses should require people to wear masks and practice social distancing. When we go out to make necessary purchases, we see a lot of people not wearing masks and not practicing social distancing. This is careless behavior and may contribute to a spike in cases here, which could quickly become out of control. In order to protect all members of our community, the city should strongly consider requiring businesses to enforce the basic safety precautions of wearing face masks and practicing social distancing. Thank you for your consideration. The last one is from Shona Gary, 112, Wailupe, W-A-I-L-U-P-E, Circle, Bastrop. Dear Mayor and City Council members, I was very impressed with our Bastrop leadership when they mandated required face coverings early on in April. I feel they did a great job in keeping our number of cases down until the governor lifted those requirements, and our numbers immediately skyrocketed from 63 to now more than 300. I believe Governor Abbott's decisions were politically motivated rather than focused on the well-being of Texas. I understand the need to reopen, but wearing a mask is not going to kill you. I work at a surgery center, and I'm required to wear a mask all day, every day I work. If I have a high-risk patient, I have to wear a surgical mask over an N95 and a face shield over that. I admit it's hot and uncomfortable, but I haven't died yet, and under no circumstances would I enter a store without a mask at this time. The elderly and those with chronic respiratory illnesses are not the only ones who are high risk. There is a large population of folks who are immunocompromised for other reasons, people who have had organ transplants, people with rheumatoid arthritis and other diseases often rely on immunosuppressive drugs just to get through their day, or maybe they're on chemotherapy for cancer, or maybe they just have a weak immune system. These people may be the person checking you out at the grocery store because they can't afford not to work. They can't afford to lose their health insurance, and they deserve to be protected to the best of our ability. We need to take care of each other. A large percentage of our community are just not taking the necessary precautions. We could all benefit from direction. Mere recommendations are obviously not enough. Face covering is no more of an infringement on our rights than being required to wear pants in public. If people feel the need to exercise their right to not wear a mask, they can do so at home. They can even go pantless if they choose. Please, I implore our local leadership to make these sensible decisions to require face covering in public places as our neighboring counties have done and keep the people of Bastrop County safe. Thank you for your consideration. Shona Gary. Madam Secretary, you were going to help keep track. Did I get them all?
Yes, Mayor, you did.
All right, that ends our citizen comments. We're moving on to item number 8, which is a consent agenda. We have 3 items on for consent. Does anyone want to pull anything off of consent? Councilmember Jackson, do you want to pull anything off of consent? Madam Secretary, if you'll please read the consent agenda.
The consent agenda reads as follows. Item 8A, consider action to approve City Council minutes from the June 9th, 2020 regular meeting, June 12th, 2020 special called meeting, and June 13th, 2020 special called meeting. Item 8B, consider action to approve the second reading of ordinance number 2020-16 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, amending the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation budget for the fiscal year 2020 in accordance with existing statutory requirements, appropriating the various amounts herein as attached in Exhibit A, repealing all prior ordinances and actions in conflict herewith, and establishing an effective date. Item 8C, consider action to approve the second reading of resolution number 2020-49 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, supporting the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation's application for an Economic Development Administration grant in the amount of $1,350,000 to facilitate the capital and facilities to provide immediate workforce training and development courses and certifications, authorizing the BEDC's expenditure of $270,000 for the required 20% local match, authorizing the BEDC's Chief Executive Officer to execute all necessary documentation, and establishing an effective date. This concludes the consent agenda.
Thank you. Madam Secretary?
Move to approve.
Move
Second.
for approval.
I have a motion to approve from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson and a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Second.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson, I heard you, but they had chimed in first, so I'll try to catch you next time. Thank you for your motion. All right, Council, we have 3 items left. The next item for individual consideration, we're about the middle of page 3, and it's item 9A, consider and adopt on first and final reading ordinance number 2020-17 as an emergency measure ratifying temporary orders enacted by the mayor in her capacity as emergency management director in regard to the current local state of disaster for the immediate preservation of public peace, health, and safety. Council, I have a couple items for you, and then we'll go over the revised phasing. Something I wanted to share with you is we are on day 100 of the emergency order, which is just take that in, because that's like nearly a third of a year. We are on day 100. We are currently at 356 cases with 100, and that is not true. We were at 356 cases this morning when I was writing the summary. This afternoon, we got another 15 cases. We are now at 371 cases. We have 129 recovered cases, so we went up by 15 cases and up by 8 recoveries, and our deaths remain at 4. The call center has accepted 1,781 phone calls during the 100 days. At this point, the vast majority of the phone calls are things like, I've been exposed, my son was exposed to someone at work, where do I go for testing? I was tested, I don't have results. There's a whole lot of testing questions. The county, with their CARES Act, is moving forward with their plan to try to transition from Mayfest to having a permanent location semi-permanent, a place that is not a temporary like they're doing it out of the trailer now at Mayfest Park, a place in Bastrop and a place in Elgin, and then utilizing Acadian to be a mobile where there's a hot spot, be able to go anywhere in the county where testing is needed. From a city standpoint, from an emergency response, we're really not involved in the testing part of it, but I know that's a huge question in the public, so I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Over the last few weeks, we had 15 cases added today. We had 23 cases added the day before. We've had another day where we were at 20 cases added in one day. We've had 19 cases added in a day and 14 cases added in a day. The curve is going up.
I'm sorry, Mayor. That's in the county, correct?
That is, yes, ma'am.
I just want to make
Thank
sure
you.
that we understand that is in the
That is
whole
in
county.
the county. That is correct.
Not just in the city, okay.
We're at
I
11, and of the 15 that were added today, they weren't in the.
I just want to make sure I
weren't in
understand you're
Census.
talking about the whole county, okay.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that. So I'm talking about county-wide cases. So the testing's going up, the numbers are going up. One of the things that we're starting to watch is of the 15 cases, how many of them were in the hospital? It's important to note that right now, if you were diagnosed with COVID, if you were home and you got to the point that you were so sick you couldn't stay home, you are going to a hospital in Austin. We have very few hospital beds, and there are certain hospitals in Austin that are designated as COVID hospitals, and that's where a person is going. So even if they are a Bastrop case, they are in a Travis County hospital at this time. Other news that I thought was worthy of sharing, because some days you just kick a person when they're down. The Food and Drug Administration is now advising that if you are utilizing hand sanitizer manufactured by ESK Biochem, and that is capital ESKBIOCHEM, you have a chance of getting methylethanol poisoning. So there are 8 sanitizers that are listed by the FDA. If you go to the county's website, or I'm sure if you Google hand sanitizers with methanol poisoning, but just so you know, please, we've checked ours. I know Chief Rosales was making sure, so ours is fine, but if anybody's maybe bought some over, online or whatever, just be aware that not all hand sanitizers are created equal. I want to give a shout out to Becky Womble and the entire Chamber of Commerce staff. They sent an email on Monday at 3:30 to all of their chamber members, and they were reminding businesses that just like they can say no shirt, no shoes, no service, they have always and didn't need permission from anyone to say no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. They have offered to each of their members the face covering required logo, so that they can print it out, they can put it on their website, they can, I thought it was a really great idea, and they specifically talked about how they would help them provide the graphic, and reminding them that they have the right to refuse service to anyone, and also sharing that Lowe's Home Improvement donated 3,000 N95 masks to the Bastrop Chamber. So if any of the businesses were needing masks and had that need, that they were a source for that. So a real hats off to them for sending that out and taking care. For the phasing, what you have in front of you, we found ourselves in a little bit of a situation. We voted on this and adopted this at our last council meeting. And at our last council meeting, we all agreed that the chamber would be open for city council meetings starting on Monday the 22nd, knowing that we were having a council meeting on Tuesday the 23rd. And we had a couple people attend tonight. There were some phone calls made that people were saying, oh, we can go tonight, and they may attend. I did not think it was a good idea to not do what we told the public we were going to do. That, and I realize that we say, you know, things can change, things can change, and we have the ability to change the date, but boy, we can sure get crossways with the public, because it would have been really difficult to get that information out in the last 24 hours. So what we are proposing to eliminate that issue in the future is that we are saying, and we are revising phase 2 to say that council chambers will be closed during council meetings. I believe we've seen that our community is excellent at utilizing the citizens' comment. You saw the number of permits that we're issuing. So even though the facility is closed, we are still able to do the business of the city. And what we are suggesting is that basically council chambers will remain closed for council meetings until at a meeting we decide this is at the next meeting we're going to open it. With the phase 3 moving from Friday, June 26th, we're changing that date to Wednesday, July 15th. That is not an accident that we have a council meeting on Tuesday, July 14th. So when we have more information and we meet again, if there's anything we need to change on phase 3, we can do it on July 14th, and then everybody's up to date on what the new phase change is. The other date that changed was on parks. Park rentals would start taking bookings. It had been after July 6th, and we are moving that to July 15th to align with the phase 3, which again is a date that could be pushed out if needed. We are saying that people can start turning in their applications. We're doing that in an effort to help staff because they're going to be reviewing their safety procedures. So, for instance, the Corvette Invasion is coming pretty soon. And outside, with a mask on, walking around looking at cars is a pretty easy activity where you can have social distancing. Councilmember Peterson, I think some of those Corvette owners are like some of the motorcycle owners, and they don't want you touching their car anyway. So it's a look, don't touch. It's an event outside, and with their safety procedures being reviewed, it seems like a logical one to move forward with. And rather than trying to piecemeal, we're saying we'll start looking at the events, and if they meet all the safety procedures and given the situation, then we would consider approving them. So Chief Rosales, City Manager Wood, Mr. Job, and I, as the Emergency Management Director, spent some time on revising this, and if you guys are okay with it, I would hope that you would consider making this the exhibit to ordinance number 2020-17, which leaves us with the conversation about mask and mandating mask. And I want each of you to have an opportunity to visit about it, but I want to say that mandating something and enforcing something is two different things. And when I read, well, it's a confrontational situation to ask a customer to put on a mask, it's difficult for me to look at Chief Nagy and say, you got enough to say grace over, and now I want you to go intervene between a customer and a business owner, and I'm just uncomfortable with that. And I will share with you that back in April, when Judge Poppy did the mandate on the mask, I was immediately getting phone calls demanding that we go arrest people walking into fill in your favorite store who don't have a mask on. And if we mandate it, I believe there is an expectation that we enforce it. And So that's my concern, that's my dilemma. I had one very nice lady call and say, Mayor, if you would just make it a rule, everyone would follow it. And I said, oh, if only that were true. I would make a rule that you can't speed in a residential neighborhood. I'd make a rule that you can't be rude to each. I'd make all kinds of rules if just me saying it would make that happen. So I thoroughly appreciate Tom Dickey from Neighbors suggested that it would be real careful, it would be beneficial to him. He believes it would level the playing field if all businesses were required to mandate it, and that gets a little tricky. And there are folks that say, I'm walking in with my family, I'm sitting down at a table with my family, and I can't wear the mask to eat anyway. So, there's just, what I am certain of is no matter what we decide tonight, not everybody's going to be happy with our decision.
Well, Mayor, is there not, there's no provisions for any kind of, if the chief gives them some kind of citation, there's no fine or any kind of penalty for
And Chief Nagy, we may get you to come, because Mayor Pro Tem Nelson was practicing law without a license. I don't want to practice law enforcement without a license. My understanding is if we were to say it is an ordinance that if you have a business and you are running a business in Bastrop, you must mandate that your customers are wearing a mask. And I was a business owner and Chief Nagy walked in without a mask, and I said, Chief Nagy, you got to leave because you don't have a mask on. And he says, oh no, I'm not leaving and I'm not putting on a mask. He is now trespassing, and then so he would come and have to remove that person for trespassing. Am I anywhere close?
Yes, that's correct. So what would happen, so we wouldn't necessarily be enforcing the mask, we'd be enforcing that they're trespassing on that person's property. And in general, what we'll do is we'll issue that person a criminal trespass warning. And that's just kind of it's a courtesy, it's a civil matter that says you need to go ahead and leave that property. Now, if they still refuse to, they could be subject to arrest, not for the mask, but for an arrestable offense of criminal trespassing.
But because the basis is, I am a business owner, you are walking into my place of business, and if you don't comply, I have a right to say I'm not serving you.
That's correct.
And that existed before COVID, after COVID, that's life.
Yes.
But that exists now, whether we say it's mandatory for all businesses or not. Is that correct?
That is exactly.
Yes, the criminal trespass,
So
yes.
any business can do that now. If they post a sign or whichever, they can still do that without us passing anything from the
That is
dais.
exactly right.
That's correct. The only
Okay.
thing that we would ask is for the person at the business, so who's working there, let's just say the owner, to go ahead and tell them by a voice rather than just a sign. That
Well,
way
I'm
there's
just
no
saying, but
mistake.
every business has the right to do that, whether we pass everything or not. You would still come and give them a trespassing
Yes, ma'am.
without us. That's what I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure.
Just like if they didn't have on shoes and you had a sign posted no shoes, and I guess Chief Nagy, you're saying it'd be like, oh, excuse me, Chief Nagy, you don't have on shoes, I need you to put on shoes or don't come in my business. And if Chief Nagy threw down, then it would
I'm
proceed.
just saying, but not every business has to require shoes. I'm
That
just
is
saying.
exactly right.
I just want to make sure.
Each individual business
It
can
has the
determine
right to
who
do whatever they
want on their
whatever
property, yes.
works for their business.
If it escalates into terroristic threats or physical confrontation, normal law enforcement processes would be in play.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yes.
yeah.
The bottom line here is the point. So a lot of these business owners would rather the city be the bad guy rather than the business. Am I reading that right?
I think that there are some business owners that would prefer to say, the mayor and council voted you have to put on a mask, rather than saying, I would like you to put on a mask. I would say they are in good company because the governor would like you to put on a mask, and the governor is not mandating that we put on a
Good
mask.
rewrite, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Jackson, you're wanting to make a comment?
I would, because that's what I've got numerous calls on. People have called me constantly, emailed me, left me voicemails about masks. There was a lot of discussion of that, and I went to Commissioner's Court on Monday, made a rare appearance wearing my mask, and they require it, of course, there. But after I did that, people were saying that they were very much in favor with having that at businesses because they didn't want to take back the disease to their family. They just felt that it was insensitive for people to come in without it. And so many other cities around us and counties are doing that, even though the governor hasn't mandated it. He's suggested it strongly. But in San Antonio, and I think I talked with our attorney about that a little bit, and San Antonio has put together some ordinance with cities that have charters, and if it deals with the preservation of our public health and safety standards and things like that too. So I would like for us to do it. I just feel strongly that so many people are at risk, and it's been proven that it doesn't stop the disease, but it prevents it, and it's helpful in the spread. And the way we're spreading lately with the disease, I think it would help us so much if we did have that enforced. Although we're not going to be able to enforce it as strongly, but I think if we suggest it strongly, it'll happen.
Councilmember Rogers?
Councilmember Ennis and the mayor, I don't think the businesses want to put us as the bad guy. I think as a business owner, they're trying to make it, if everybody did the same thing, they would all be in the same group. So I'm not thinking the business.
They're trying to level the playing
Right,
field.
I'm not thinking they're trying to make us the bad guy. I just think it's, well, if everybody's doing it, then nobody will be mad at just me. So I just wanted to let you guys know that businesses aren't trying to get y'all.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. So, Councilmember Jackson, would you be okay with we can, as a part of this ordinance, recommend strongly that everyone wear masks in the public?
I think that would make some of our citizens feel better because, as was pointed out in some of the letters, the comments, people are coming in from everywhere into town, and most people expect it. It's just the very few people that are objecting to the mask. But if they don't see the mask, if they don't see it enforced and they don't see the signs, they just, it becomes lax.
Councilmember Ennis?
I've got a question for you, and it's just to clarify in my mind. So we mandate masks. The business owner puts up a sign and does the a vocal admonition, and say it's a restaurant and bar. Of course, we all know you can't have a mask on when you're eating and drinking. Is that so? The owner will make the business will make the decision when they have to wear the mask and when they don't within their own business.
I don't know how that works.
That's a very good point. So you have to wear the mask entering, but when you eat and drink, you take it off, and then you have to put it back on when you leave? I mean...
That's what most of the restaurants are doing that are enforcing that. They are saying that you come in and when you are, especially since we've gone up to a higher percentage, but of course when you eat or drink, you have to take the mask off. And so people are taking the mask off when they're at the meal, but if they leave the table to go to the restroom, or if they leave the table to go and pass by other people inside, they would be wearing the mask. And of course, the employees and the servers and things would be hopefully wearing masks at all times.
Well, I personally don't like telling a business what they have to do. That's just, I just don't think it's our right is to tell them how they have to run their business. I mean.
So.
And I just. Go
ahead, Councilmember Jackson.
I was just going to say, and I personally don't like to see. Or, am I speaking or someone else?
You have the floor, Councilmember Jackson.
Oh, okay. I just personally don't like to see our numbers rising as high as they are, and it's a safety thing for me. And being that I'm in that population of people that are very susceptible, I won't go into any business or any place that does not require that. And with the distancing now changing a lot, I'm making a lot of other choices about where I go, period, even if it is with a mask, if the distancing is changing. So I would strongly suggest we do something about the mask to businesses.
So, Councilmember Rogers, to specifically answer your question, out of the 371 confirmed cases, there are 13 inside the city limits of Bastrop. So that is our number. The city of Smithville is 12, the city of Bastrop is 13, the city of Elgin is 113, and the remainder of the unincorporated area of Bastrop County is 233. So,
Mayor, I also would like to point out that, of course, at all of our businesses and restaurants, almost the majority, well, I won't say the majority, but more than half of the people that visit our businesses and our restaurants and bars are not in the city limits.
yes, sir. I agree. And some of them aren't even within Bastrop County, especially in the city
Exactly.
of Bastrop. They may be from other places.
As I made that point earlier, passing through.
I don't hear anyone saying we don't think it's a good idea for people to wear masks in public. I think the discussion is whether you want to mandate an ordinance. And Mr. Attorney, if we don't have an ordinance written, some of the questions that were brought up, so if you're sitting at a table, are you eating and drinking? Is it only if there's food and drink on your table? Would we need to write an ordinance and then we have to read it twice before it could go into effect?
Well, Mayor and Council, we're still under a emergency disaster declaration, which means as mayor, you have power to do certain things unilaterally, which will be in effect until the city council either ratifies at a future meeting or repeals it. So there's always that. We do not have a written ordinance in front of us with specific language, which the council would need to adopt such a thing tonight. So much of this discussion is guidance for either you to act unilaterally or me to prepare something for the near future.
So, Council, assuming that we are all, I think the very best thing we can do is lead by example. I think the best thing that every person, whether they're a Texan or even outside of the state, although if they're outside of the state, I'm kind of okay with them not coming to Texas for a while, but every person has just like a business owner has the ability to require a mask, every person has the ability to not walk in a business. Every person has an ability to choose to not do business there. Several of the businesses have curbside pickup, contactless, they've come up with some pretty creative ways. One deal is to go back to the mandating, and there are some folks in our community that when they hear the word mandate, it doesn't matter what the words are that come after it. They don't like being told what to do. The other end of the extreme is to just ignore it, and I think that's a bad one as well. I think middle ground would be for us to have this ordinance be the Exhibit A, which is the revised phasing, with strongly recommending that all businesses require masks as appropriate and that all citizens wear masks when they're in public and unable to maintain social distancing. Some of that kind of generic language. Councilmember Peterson?
Yes, I totally agree, Mayor, because passing the ordinance, by passing another ordinance that the city won't be able to enforce. So just make it strongly mandate, or not mandate, just require people, suggest, that's a good word.
Strongly recommend.
Strongly recommend that we do it, and just remind our citizens that everybody see how the COVID peaked after Memorial Day. And we've got July 4th coming up. So people need to be conscious of what's going on because 19 is not going away. So we need to just inform the public to be safe as they can And that's as far as we can go.
And I would also, counsel, with your encouragement or with your permission, or if you tell me, no, we don't want you to do that, I'd like to once again utilize our social media, all of our social media outlets to, be kind. And the kind thing to do is to wear the mask and kind of go at it from setting a good example, strongly recommend, helping with, I know we've got some supplies and that kind of route. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
I'm in total agreement. I would like to continue to reiterate that all of the city facilities, masks are still required. That is one area that we can mandate, that we're not interfering with the individual considerations of the businesses. I think by recommending it and having that policy about public facilities, I think will help the individual businesses quite a bit.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, for making that clear, because as we are keeping the facilities closed, if people, you saw that they're having their pre-development meetings and stuff, if you come inside, you are stopped at the door. If you come in, you are masked, your temperature's taken. We've got to protect our staff. We don't have 3 city managers. We don't have 3 assistant city managers. We can't put them on shifts. We've got to protect all of our staff in all of our, everyone that's in employment, city attorneys and city secretaries and everybody. It takes all of us. So I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move to approve the motion of the new schedule and the recommendation for people to wear the masks in public and the requirement to wear masks in city facilities. Is that right?
For guests to wear masks.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a motion from Councilmember Rogers. Was that a second, Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
In that public information, I would like to just add that through our social media and things, there are, I've seen several PSAs that basically are good graphics, and they show and they discuss wearing the mask. I mean, they don't say, this is mandated, but they do the pros of wearing a mask. I think if we could get some of those and utilize them on our social media, that would be helpful also.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. That's a great suggestion. Any further comments? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
All right, Council, we have 2 items left, and the next one's fun and is going to go fast, I believe. 9B, consider action to approve resolution number R 2020-54 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, endorsing the Bird City mural project for Fisherman's Park, authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents, providing for repealing clause, and establishing an effective date. Mr. Jobe, and I also have citizen comments when you're done.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll keep this short. Essentially, we have a process for approving these murals. And as you can see, this is 8 by 7, 25 foot approximately in length, but a little better picture is here. It was unanimously approved by the Parks Board, Bastrop Art and Public Places, and we're just bringing it here to council for some final approval. And with that, I'll take any questions.
And with that, I'll read you.
Oh, go ahead. I had something to say, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to read the citizen comments, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, well, I had promised some of the Parks Board members and things as the liaison that I would make sure and make that a motion, because we did approve it in our Parks Board meeting recently, and I think it would be a great idea to go ahead and accept it. So I was going to make a motion, but if you've got comments to read, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll hold my motion until it's appropriate.
Okay. The first comment is from Dorothy Scarnulis at 130 Clearwater Pass. Mayor and Council, I'm representing the Bird City Bastrop Coalition, which was successful in securing for the city one of the 4 inaugural designations in the state, which included Houston, Dallas, and Port Aransas. The proposed avian mural was introduced on the agenda at the Bastrop Art and Public Places Board on June 3rd and passed. The following night at the Parks Board, the same action to favorably send to council. This mural is only 1 one way to display and advertise our status. Visit Bastrop is convening a marketing panel to develop a long-range strategy for development of marketing plan to systematically emphasize our designation. The mural is not only beautiful and educational, but will give an interactive quality for local and tourists alike. People can take photographs so they're engaging with the design. We look forward to council approval to begin design. The next comment is from Louise Ridlin at 107 Timber Hill Cove, Cedar Creek, Texas. I am a member of the Bastrop Bird City Collaborative Committee, the Bird City Collaborative Committee. Being designated as one of the 4 bird cities in the inaugural year of the program is a huge honor. The committee, the Bastrop Art and Public Places Board, and the Parks Board have approved submitting a plan for a bird mural in a public place to draw attention to this designation, as well as heighten public awareness of the importance of birds in our lives. I encourage the City Council to add their approval to this project so it can go ahead. Thank you. Jeffrey Staten at 920 Main. I'm proud our city has been designated as a bird city of Texas. As one of the muralists of Bastrop, I would greatly appreciate our city approving the proposal for 9B, a mural in Fisherman's Park. And the last is a comment from Maria Hohenstein that says, Item 9B, murals are a way for towns to publicly proclaim who they are. This mural was imagined by artists, naturalists, and birders. It's also an example of what public and private entitled can do together. I support the proposal, item 9B. Let this be the very first of many murals which embody the spirit of Bastrop. Maria Montoya Hohenstein. Is it Stein or Steen? I think it's Stein. I think it's Stein. I sure hope I'm saying your name correctly. All right, Council.
Hornstein.
So, Councilmember Jackson, did you have a motion?
Yes, I move to approve the Bird City mural in Fisherman's Park because it is quite an honor for us to be one of the 4 bird cities in Texas in its inaugural year.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Jackson and a second from
I have a
Councilmember Ennis.
So after the mural is on the restroom, will there be like a sign or something, so if a visitor comes to town, will they understand what the mural means? Like a plaque or something, so if a visitor comes, they'll know we painted this for that great
designation.
Yeah, that.
Right, I think there'll be there's some Bird City signage in our parks. We can certainly work on something that's not part of this project. I think the goal here is to have something selfie-worthy that people want to stop and take a picture with.
Well, I didn't want big words. I just meant maybe there was something.
Right, a small
As long
plaque.
as there's something in the park that explains it.
Sure.
That'd be great. Just making sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilman Jackson may correct me on this, but my understanding was there was going to be something, because it's not only the mural, but it's also you can get involved in the mural.
You can do a selfie
It's
and make it look
interactive,
like the
yes.
birds landing on your shoulder and
Yeah,
stuff like
birds
that.
landing on your shoulder, etc. And it's painted in a way that it's interactive. So I think there's supposed to be something that defines that, but
Right, there'll be lots of other information distributed, as you said, like through Visit Bastrop and other agencies, and I'm sure we'll be reading lots about it, and I'll check with the parks, with the group, and see if they're going to do something else in addition to that, maybe explaining, giving a little history of the mural. It's got the logo on it, but I think some additional information wouldn't hurt.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yeah, I just want to know that one of the identifiers of this body is the fact that the inclusive nature of our volunteer group, and note that there were 2 of our volunteer organizations or volunteer groups that voted unanimously for this. So that really does my heart good. So,
Sort of an easy vote, is that what you're saying,
yeah,
Mayor Pro
yes,
Tem
ma'am.
Nelson? All right, any other comments? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jackson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis,
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson,
yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Let's have a round of applause for that whole team.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of Dorothy Skarnulis and that entire committee. They just really took that idea and ran with it. And Mr. Job, if you would please give our thanks to your staff, you and your staff as well, that were involved with helping them get that application done and working on this. It's a neat community thing. We are moving on to 9C, the last item for individual consideration. Consider action to approve resolution number R 2020-55 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, amending the contract amount for the Pine Street Drainage Improvements Sewer Relocation to 304 Construction LLC in the amount of $73,200 as attached as Exhibit A, authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents for the change order and establishing an effective date. Mr. Job.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I have a quick map here. Essentially, you can see that, we're working on the Pine Street Drainage Project, something we've talked about since 2016. Basically, at the east end of the Pine Street ditch, there where that red dot is at, there's a sewer line that crosses the ditch. That needs to be relocated because there's another one that crosses at the north end of the ditch. What we're going to do is relocate that, tie it in so there's one crossing so it will not obstruct things as they flow through. Because with the grade of the existing there on the east end, it would catch trash and debris and probably get broken quite a bit, and that's something we don't want to happen. The highlight, I think, of this story, though, is the funding. So we can talk about that as well. When the Phase 2 project was awarded, it was awarded for a certain amount, and this change order is about $2,965 over that original funded amount. However, what you don't have in your packet, because I hadn't written the letter yet, is a letter that I wrote to Tatum this week and sent off because the Phase 1 request was about $20,000 over this amount. So what I've asked them to do is give me $20,000 over the original. Let me look at this because I'm going to cheat just a little bit. $528,075 to make that the new budget amount so we can cover this completely with a 25% match. Does that help?
Is that everybody following?
One thing I'd like, well, kinda. One thing I'd like for you to ask you to do in future staff reports like this.
Yes, sir.
Is always put the actual entity and then the acronym in parentheses after it, because you have HMGP, and I know I'm supposed to know what that is, but I don't.
Yeah.
And FEMA, of course, I know,
Right.
but every time I see TDEM, I go, okay, what is TDEM? So if you could do that, it'd be a lot easier.
Absolutely. We're going to fix that. So just so we're clear, it's a hazardous mitigation grant program for HGMP. HGMP.
Got to talk slower.
The HGMP is the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program.
Okay, great.
And TDEM is Texas Department of Emergency
Emergency
Management.
Yeah, but we will make sure that's there so it's easy to
Yeah,
understand.
it's like an alphabet soup sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
I totally understand. So,
Good point, Councilmember Ennis, because I was wondering about those acronyms as well.
so he's got to get the paperwork together, and you guys will recall that I fussed at Mr. Job when he brought us a change order after the fact. This is a change order that's coming prior to. I was very appreciative of him doing that. It's got to be done. Councilmember Peterson, I think, all of us agree, it's got to be done. And if we get the paperwork in place, hopefully they can get the grant to cover it. If the grant doesn't cover it, then there is a backup plan to fund it. How, Mr. Job?
I would fund this out of the Water and Wastewater Fund.
It's got to be done. So, with
move
that,
to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Councilmember
Second.
Rogers and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. Is there any further questions or discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Jackson,
Yes, the train is going by, I can hardly hear.
Councilmember Ennis,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yes.
The motion Passes unanimously. Council, I'm going to go back to 9A real quick. Thank you, City Manager. We talked about the sneeze guards at the last council meeting, and there's the cheap way and the permanent way, and we would be using CARES Act money. We don't need a council vote on it, but because it's CARES Act money, is that correct?
That is it. Right.
When we do open the building to the public, they're going to put up plastic so that it's not just, and we'll be doing it at the library and at the reception areas.
When did we talk about this before?
We talked about it at the last council meeting.
Okay.
And you had said, I don't want to make a decision on this tonight, bring something back to me. Do we have prices or design?
What I do have a price for City Hall, all of the repairs, and it's about $36,718, which I guess the less permanent solution that we've been looking at in the past is right around $16,000. That's for all the buildings. What you'll see here is we'll match the same metal, much like these frames on the windows. It'll be all tempered glass. I do not have a design to show you tonight, but that would be the more permanent solution to match the existing features in the building, but it'd be more permanent. And I'm going to assume this is $36,000 for City Hall. There's just about as much work over at the library. I would put it in the range of $20,000 to $25,000 extra. So we're looking at a $60,000 to $65,000 permanent solution versus a temporary for 16, and that was the discussion.
But we have $500,000 in CARES Act money, and we
That's
believe
correct.
we have not used all of that money, so this would be covered by CARES Act money.
And Tracy can correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't even spent the $120,000.
We haven't spent our first 20%.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Ennis?
So we're talking about basically sneeze guards rather than masks.
Correct. So you would be behind covered glass. You would have a
I got
speaker
thrown
hole.
off because we used the word mask somewhere in this conversation, and I went, I don't remember that. Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
So your temporary solution, what is it, plexiglass standalone shields? Is that what
Correct.
you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yes.
Yep.
$16,000? Is that what you said?
For all the buildings.
For all of our buildings?
For all of our buildings,
Oh,
that's
I
correct.
thought you were just here at City Hall, and I was going to have to question that.
No, that's for the entire,
So-
all of the buildings.
No question now.
Correct.
So council, 2 weeks ago, the conversation was, well, if we're trying to open the building to the public, we got to rock and roll with this. Now that we're going to slow our roll a little bit and not open to the public, really what I believe Mr. Job's looking for is it correct that council's intention that we do a more permanent solution when it's covered by the CARES Act and it lasts long term? Are we in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're looking at a new normal here, so this may last until we get a vaccine.
So then the other thing I need to know, because it's a sizable amount of money, so I guess it may have to come back to council anyway, even though it's
If it's
CARES
over
Act.
50, it does.
So as soon as they get a final design, then they would come back to us. Councilmember Rogers?
So, okay, so you're talking about City Hall and the library. What other city buildings would we think of putting this up to?
The other city facilities are already, the other folks are already behind glass.
Oh, okay, I was just
Except for
getting-
the library and here.
And there's two, it would be both the lobbies here at City Hall. I think she was just saying, we said all the buildings, and she's like, what are
Right.
all the
Sorry,
buildings?
all the-
Well,
all
some
the buildings in this
conversations, you
case.
just say
Yeah.
the library and this, and some conversations, you say all the city buildings. So I
Yeah.
was just making sure
So-
what.
So to be clear, at City Hall, we're talking about the reception area
Mm-hmm.
up front. We're talking about introducing a
Planning and
window at the
zoning.
planning and zoning office,
And
removing the room that's there now, and turning that window into a glass window that you can talk through, and then the utility counter. And then at the library, it's the circulation desk. There's another desk in the kids area that will still be plastic or a plexiglass type of material because it's not permanent. And then the desk as you walk into your right, which is where all the business happens, and
And
you check out.
that's the only two buildings?
That is the only two buildings.
That need any reinforcement.
Because municipal
Right,
court,
I
the police,
know what
the other ones are
police department
covered.
looks like. I've been there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't in trouble though. I was just there.
She was just visiting Chief Nagy, she wasn't in trouble. Okay, so so he'll come back with a design and a bid and that stuff, but there's no point in them doing that if if council was like, no, we don't want to spend the money that way, so they're just trying to touch base with that. Okay. City Manager, did that cover what you wanted? Okay. Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Okay, so I think we have executive session left. Is everybody else agree we've done everything else? All right, executive session, and I believe there may be a couple more comments on 10A, so do I have to read it? I don't have to read it again, do I? Can I just say 10A?
10A is sufficient.
10A. 10B, pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071 and 551.072, to deliberate upon, seek the legal advice of, and direct its litigation counsel regarding the Main Street Rehabilitation Project, including pending legal proceedings for 1113 Main Street, McDonald. And 10C, City Council shall convene to close executive session pursuant to Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate the acquisition of property and easements associated with the construction of wastewater treatment plant number 3. It is 10:11 and we are in executive session. All right, thumbs up from Colin. It is midnight, and we are out of executive session for item number 11. There is no action as a result of executive session. Councilmember Peterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Everyone can sleep late in the morning. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
It is midnight, and we are adjourned. Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you, Mr. Job. Thank you, Chief Nagy. Thank you, Madam Secretary and Mr. Attorney. Safe drives.
Night all.